Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm trying out my microphone tonight. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Okay, I can hear me okay. I just opened my live, so clearly I can hear me okay. What's up, Matt? It's good to see you, man. Cool. We're going to try this out and see how it works out for the night. And that way I can kind of lean back in my chair finally and not have to hold my posture so upright. But it's good to see you tonight, Matt. How was your day? Did you have a good Labor Day? And happy Labor Day to everybody. Oh, I hope you guys don't hear me slurping now while I drink my coffee. And what is everybody drinking tonight? Nice and loud. I like it. I'll try not to yell as I read now. I should have a very much more natural. No, not at all. Excellent. No, not at all. Was that to, did you have a good day? I hope that's not to, did you have a good day? And I hope nobody noticed, but I actually had to take this one and I had to turn it a little bit earlier. Excellent. Well, I turned my fan off. I should probably turn it on and see if you can still hear it so that I could have that. Not that it reaches me, so, but the air conditioner is still on, and I'm glad that it filters out the noise. That's kind of what I was going for. Whew. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. And happy Monday. Hey, Leanne, good morning. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well today. Another thing I have to kind of keep an eye on is, as this microphone is plugged in, I can charge my phone too, and I have to see if it charges it just the same or if I'm going to have to swap it back at some point. But I should be okay. And hey, Leanne, just so you know, I'm using one of those clip-on microphones down here. So that's what's picking me up a little bit. I know you were asking about it. Lori! What's going on, Lori? How are you doing? Hope you're doing okay. Excellent. I love that. Unless y'all like the white noise, I can turn it back if you like the white noise. But I figured this way I can actually, use the lumbar support in my chair and not have to sit so front forward too. Hey, no worries at all. Hopefully I can provide some good background noise for you. I'm glad that you're getting through it, regardless if work is terrible. But if work was easy, it wouldn't be called work, is what people say when they can't accept it. I meant to ask too, you guys probably can't hear the music anymore, huh? Yeah, probably not. I didn't think about that, and that's something I may have to think about. Unless you can hear the music, that would be great. No music. That's a little bit rough, but I think we'll be okay for just this stream. I didn't think about that. Of course, I can still hear the music, but you won't, because it was normally picked up by the phone speaker, the phone microphone. So, but if y'all are all right with it, we'll jump into and try it out this way and see if it kind of translates a little bit better. But you guys just let me know. And in the meantime, as always, we're going to give this a solve real quick. This is becoming less about showing you guys the Rubik's Cube and more about me being consistent with my practice, because I certainly don't want to put it down quite yet. And typically when I learn something and learn it very, very well, it always kind of just goes away after that. And this is one thing I certainly don't want it to go away. So we're going to stay consistent with it. Yeah, no worries at all. Hey, man. I hope you enjoy your meeting. All right. I might be able to turn the music up, but that might distract me. So, and I'm gonna have to figure out how to use all these fancy new toys to my benefit. There we go. That. Consistent, yeah. And not to sound cliche, but consistency is key. And I had kind of a revelation, so I guess you can call this like a mini story time. But as I was watching all of these speed cubers going and going, I came across this one video, and this tuber was talking about one of the fastest Rubik's cubers in our lifetime, which is Baum. And he's Chinese, real young. I think he's like 9 or 10 now. But he can solve a Rubik's Cube in like 4 seconds. Is probably his best time. And he can sometimes do sub 4 seconds. Less than 4 seconds. And I found this video, and they're like, he keeps getting better. And typically it's like, yeah, okay, well, if he practices, of course he's going to get better. But people also realize that he hasn't really been changing his technique at all. And so the point of this whole video was that maybe it's not about learning new techniques or new algorithms. And maybe in our everyday life, maybe it's not about learning those new things on how to do our job more efficiently, but doing it the way that you have been doing it, just getting really good at doing it that way. And that kind of inspired me to continue to solve Rubik's Cubes the way that I have been solving Rubik's Cubes, and not change my strategy on it, just try and get quicker with it each time. So it is wild, right? Sub 4 seconds, little kid. And I've even so much as watched his videos where they slowed it down so you can see all of his careful moves. And I think they said that he makes about like 22 turns a minute, like a second or something like that, something crazy. But you can see his hands are already spinning the next section before that first one ever makes its connection. And it's quite inspiring. It's quite frustrating as well. But the kid practices 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And when you practice with the 3x3 for 3, 4, 5 hours a day, you start learning some pretty cool stuff. So I encourage you and implore you, the 3 that showed up, please pick it up. Plus, it keeps my brain spry. Yep, and I absolutely love it. And I appreciate everybody being here tonight. This is Relax and Read with the Pokey Ghost and the Pokey Ghost fam in the chat. Of course, we are reading through Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz in our complete Oz series set. There's 15 books. I think this is book 4. And honestly, y'all, I'm feeling a little bit ambitious. I go back to work tomorrow, so I think I'm honestly going to be reading and trying to finish this book tonight. Even though we're only on chapter 9 and there's 20 chapters, I think we can do it. And so between chapters might be a little less as I try and get through. But I hope that you all do enjoy. And for those that don't recall, there is a fruit in this magical fairyland that we find ourselves in now. They ended up in a glass city filled with vegetable people. And as it is right now, they ran into a family and farmhouse, but they couldn't see anybody. When asked why they couldn't see anybody, they kind of unveiled that, Mama, hey Mama Ghost, how are you? It's good to see you. I appreciate you popping in. They make the eater invisible. And so, of course, they find this out just as they realize that the bears of this country, as there are bears in it, also eat the dama fruit, which is the fruit that makes you turn invisible, but it is absolutely amazing tasting. And so, we are going to move into our next chapter, chapter 9, which is They Fight the Invisible Bears. But typically, they started eating the fruit because it made them invisible to the bears. So, good. I'm glad you're good, Mama. Hi, Mama Ghost, says Lori. All right. We are just past that 10-minute mark. I appreciate everybody being here that planned to come in. I did want to apologize greatly. I did have this originally planned for a little bit later in the day, 8:30, 11:30 Eastern time. But then it dawned upon me earlier in the week that I didn't have to work today. So I decided to start a little bit earlier. What's up, Team Mishans? I appreciate you popping in just to say hey. It means the world to me. And it's super good to see you, man. I hope you had a great day. I know that it's probably just starting out, but I hope your day is great. And we are about to jump into our read for the night so that we can kind of save a little bit of time and see how much we can rock out tonight. And the only reason I do that is because if we do our normal 7 chapters tonight, we're going to literally have 3 chapters next time, and then I kind of have that decision on, do we finish this book in just that stream, or do we start the next book too, which I don't really like to do. So what I'm going to try and do is finish this book tonight, and we'll see how it goes. Excellent. I appreciate that, Mishans. Truly, I'm looking forward to it. That is something that I desperately need to do this coming week, is get all of my mail out. It's starting to pile up a little bit. But the only thing not piling up is money. But I hope you all can hear me okay. And I hope you don't have to hear me slurp when I slurp my coffee. But having this mic allows me to sit back a little bit. And we're going to jump right on into it. And we're going to start with chapter 9. Woo! They fight the invisible bears. Excellent. Thanks for that, Mishans. The strangers took their seats at a table willingly enough, for they were all hungry, and the platters were now heaped with good things to eat. In front of each place was a plate bearing one of the delicious dama fruit, and the perfume that rose from these was so enticing and sweet that they were sorely tempted to eat of them and become invisible. But Dorothy satisfied her hunger with other things, and her companions did likewise, resisting the temptation. "Why do you not eat the damas?" asked the woman's voice. "We do not want to get invisible," answered the girl. "But if you remain visible, the bears will see you and devour you," said a girl's young voice that belonged to one of the children. "We who live here much prefer to be invisible, for we can still hug and kiss one another, and are quite safe from the bears." "And we do not have to be so particular about our dress," remarked the man. "And Mama can't tell whether my face is dirty or not," added the other childish voice gleefully. But I make you wash it every time I think of it," said the mother, "for it stands no reason your face is dirty, Ianu, whether I can see it or not." Dorothy laughed and stretched out her hands. "Come here, please, Ianu and your sister, and let me feel of you," she requested. They came to her willingly, and Dorothy passed her hands over their faces and forms and decided one was a girl of about her own age and the other a boy, somewhat smaller. The girl's hair was soft and fluffy and her skin as smooth as satin. When Dorothy gently touched her nose and ears and lips, they seemed all well and delicately formed. "For if I could see you, I am sure you would be beautiful," she declared. The girl laughed, and her mother said, "We are not vain in the Valley of Voe, because we cannot display our beauty, and good actions and pleasant ways are what makes us lovely to our companions. Yet we can see and appreciate the beauties of nature, and dainty flowers and trees, the green fields, and the clear blue of the sky." "How about the birds and beasts and fish?" asked Zeb. "The birds we cannot see because they love to eat of the damas as much as we do. Yet we hear their sweet song and enjoy them. Neither can we see the cruel bears, for they also eat the fruit, but the fish that swim in our brooks we can see, and often we catch them to eat." "It occurs to me you have a great deal to make you happy, even while invisible," remarked the wizard. "Nevertheless, we would prefer to remain visible while we are in your valley." Just then Eureka came in, for she had been, until now, wandering outside with Jim, and when the kitten saw the table set with food, she cried out, "Now you must feed me, Dorothy, for I'm half-starved." The children were inclined to be frightened by the sight of a small animal, which reminded them of the bears, but Dorothy reassured them by explaining that Eureka was a pet, and could do no harm, even if she wished to. Then, as the others had by this time moved away from the table, the kitten sprang upon the chair, and put her paws upon the cloth to see what there was to eat. To her surprise, an unseen hand clutched her and held her suspended in the air. Eureka was frantic with terror and tried to scratch and bite, so the next moment she was dropped to the floor. "Did you see that, Dorothy?" she gasped. "Yes, dear," her mistress replied. "There are people living in this house, although we cannot see them, and you must have better manners, Eureka, or something worse will happen to you." She placed a plate of food upon the floor, and the kitten ate greedily. "Give me that nice-smelling fruit I saw on the table," she begged, when she had cleaned the plate. "Those are damas," said Dorothy, "and you must never taste them, Eureka, or you'll get invisible, and then we can't see you at all." The kitten gazed wistfully at the forbidden fruit. "Does it hurt to be invisible?" she asked. "I don't know," Dorothy answered, "but it would hurt me dearly to lose you." "Very well, I won't touch it," decided the kitten, "but you must keep it away from me, for the smell is very tempting." "Can you tell us, sir or madam," said the wizard, addressing the air because he did not quite know where the unseen people stood, "if there is any way we can get out of your beautiful valley and on top of the earth again?" "Oh, one can leave the valley easily enough," answered the man's voice, "but to do so you must enter the far less pleasant country. As for reaching the top of the earth, I have never heard that it's possible to do that, and if you succeed in getting there, you would probably fall off." "Oh, no," said Dorothy. "We've been there, and we know." "The Valley of Voe is certainly a charming place," resumed the wizard, "but we cannot be contented in any other land but our own for long. Even if we should come to an unpleasant place on our way, it is necessary, in order to reach the earth's surface, to keep moving on towards it." "In that case," said the man, "it will be best for you to cross our valley and mount the spiral staircase inside the Pyramid Mountain. The top of that mountain is lost in the clouds, and when you reach it, you will be in the awful land of Naught, where the gargoyles live." "What are gargoyles?" asked Zeb. "I do not know, young sir. Our greatest champion, Overmananu, once climbed the spiral staircase and fought 9 days with the gargoyles before he could escape them and come back. But he could never be induced to describe the dreadful creatures, and soon afterward a bear caught him up and ate him." The wanderers were rather discouraged by this gloomy report, but Dorothy said with a sigh, And if the only way to get home is to meet the gargoyles, then we've got to meet them. They can't be worse than the Wicked Witch or the Gnome King. But you must remember you had the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman to help you conquer those enemies," suggested the wizard. "Just now, my dear, there is not a single warrior in your company." "Oh, I guess Zeb could fight if he had to. Couldn't you, Zeb?" asked the little girl. "Perhaps if I had to," answered Zeb doubtfully. And you have joined sword, and you chopped the vegetable sorcerer, chopped the vegetable sorcerer in two with, the girl said to the little man. True, he replied, and in my satchel are other useful things to fight with. What the gargoyles most dread is a noise, said a man's voice. Our champion told me that when he shouted his battle cry, the creatures shuddered and drew back, hesitating to continue the combat. But they were in great numbers, and the champion could not shout much, because he had to save his breath for fighting. Very good, said the wizard. We can all yell better than we can fight, so we ought to defeat the gargoyles. But tell me, said Dorothy, how did such a brave champion happen to let the bears eat him? And if he was invisible, and the bears invisible, who knows that they really ate him up? The champion had killed 11 bears in his time, returned the unseen man. And we know this is true because when any creature is dead, the invisible charm of the Dama fruit ceases to be active, and the slain one can be plainly seen by all eyes. When the champion killed a bear, everyone could see it. And when the bears killed the champion, we all saw several pieces of him scattered about, which of course disappeared again when the bears devoured him. They now bade farewell to the kind but unseen people of the cottage, and after the man had called their attention to a high pyramid-shaped mountain on the opposite side of the valley, and told them how to travel in order to reach it, they again started upon their journey. They followed the course of the broad stream and passed several more pretty cottages, but of course they saw no one, nor did anyone speak to them. Fruits and flowers grew plentifully all about, and there were many of the delicious damas that the people of O were fond of. About noon they stopped to allow Jim to rest in the shade of the pretty orchard, and while they plucked and ate some of the cherries and plums that grew there, a soft voice suddenly said to them, There are bears nearby, be careful. The wizard got out his sword at once, and Zeb grabbed the horsewhip. Dorothy climbed into the buggy, although Jim had been unharnessed from it and was grazing some distance away. The owner of the unseen voice laughed delightedly and said, You cannot escape the bears that way. How can we escape? Said Dorothy nervously, for the unseen danger is always the hardest to face. You must take to the river, was the reply. The bears will not venture upon the water. But we would be drowned, exclaimed the girl. Oh, there is no need of that, said the voice, which from its gentle tone seemed to belong to a young girl. You are strangers in the Valley of O, and do not seem to know our ways, so I will try to save you. The next moment, a broad-leaved plant was jerked from the ground where it grew and held suspended in the air before the wizard. Sir, said the voice, you must rub these leaves upon the soles of all your feet, and then you will be able to walk upon the water without sinking below the surface. It is a secret the bears do not know, and we people of O usually walk upon the water when we travel, and so escape our enemies. Thank you, cried the wizard joyfully, and at once rubbed the leaf on the soles of Dorothy's shoes and then his own. The girl took a leaf and rubbed it upon the kitten's paws, and the rest of the plant was handed to Zeb, who, after applying it to his own feet, carefully rubbed it on all fours of Jim's hooves, and then upon the tires of the buggy wheels. He had nearly finished this last task when a low growling was suddenly heard, and the horse began to jump around and kick viciously with his heels. Quick, to the water, or you are lost, cried the unseen friend, who without hesitation the wizard drew the buggy down the bank and out upon the broad river, for Dorothy was still seated in with Eureka in her arms. They did not sink at all, owing to the virtues of the strange plant they had used, and when the buggy was in the middle of the stream, the wizard returned to the bank to assist Zeb and Jim. The horse was plunging madly about, and 2 or 3 deep gashes appeared upon its flanks from which the blood flowed freely. Run for the river, shouted the wizard, and Jim quickly freed himself of his unseen tormentors by a few vicious kicks, and then obeyed. As soon as he trotted out upon the surface of the river, he found himself safe from pursuit, and Zeb was already running across the water toward Dorothy. As the little wizard turned to follow them, he felt a hot breath against his cheek and heard a low, fierce growl. At once he began stabbing at the air with his sword, and he knew that he had struck some substance because when he drew back the blade, it was dripping with blood. The third time that he thrust out the weapon, there was a loud roar and a fall, and suddenly at his feet appeared the form of a great red bear, which was nearly as big as the horse and much stronger and fiercer. The beast was quite dead from the sword thrust, and after a glance at its terrible claws and sharp teeth, the little man turned in a panic and rushed out upon the water, for other menacing growls told him more bears were near. On the river, however, the adventurers seemed to be perfectly safe. Dorothy and the buggy had floated slowly down the stream with the current of the water, and the others made haste to join her. The wizard opened his satchel and got out some sticking plaster, with which he mended the cuts Jim had received from the claws of the bears. "I think we better stick to the river after this," said Dorothy. "If our unknown friend hadn't warned us and told us what to do, we would all be dead by this time." "That is true," agreed the wizard, "and as the river seems to be flowing in the direction of the Pyramid Mountain, it will be the easiest way for us to travel." Zeb hitched Jim to the buggy again, and the horse trotting along and drew them rapidly over the smooth water. The kitten was at first dreadfully afraid of getting wet, but Dorothy let her down, and soon Eureka was frisking along beside the buggy without being scared a bit. Once a little fish swam too near the surface, and the kitten grabbed it in her mouth quick and ate it up as quick as a wink. But Dorothy cautioned her to be careful when she ate in this valley of enchantments, and no more fish were careless enough to swim within reach. After a journey of several hours, they came to a point where the river curved, and they found they must cross a mile or so of the valley before they came to the Pyramid Mountain. There were few houses in this part, and few orchards or flowers, so our friends feared they might encounter more of the savage bears, which they had learned to dread with all their hearts. "You have to make a dash, Jim," said the wizard, "and run as fast as you can go." "All right," answered the horse. "I'll do my best. But you must remember I'm old and my dashing days are past and gone." All three got into the buggy, and Zeb picked up the reins. Though Jim needed no guidance of any sort, the horse was still smarting from the sharp claws of the invisible bears, and as soon as he was on land, he headed toward the mountain, and thought that more of those fearsome creatures might be near, acted as a spur, and sent him galloping along in a way that made Dorothy catch her breath. Then Zeb, in a sprint of mischief, uttered in a growl like that of the bears, and Jim perked up his ears and fairly flew. His bony legs moved so fast that they scarcely were seen, and the wizard clung fast to the seat and yelled, "Whoa!" at the top of his voice. I'm afraid he's running away," gasped Dorothy. Sorry, y'all, 1 second. Go lay down. You're fine. Go lay down. Sorry. "I know he is," said Zeb, "but no bear can catch him if he keeps that gait. And the harness of the buggy don't break." Jim did not make a mile a minute, but almost before they were aware of it, he drew up at the foot of the mountain, so suddenly that the wizard and Zeb both sailed over the dashboard and landed in the soft grass, where they rolled over several times before they stopped. Dorothy nearly went with them, but she was holding fast to the iron rail of the seat, and that saved her. She squeezed the kitten, though, until it screeched, and then the old cab horse made several curious sounds that led the little girl to suspect he was laughing at all of them. Hey, Go Spencer, how's it going? Kind of like the sound of the slurping coffee. Oh, okay. No. I always like the... You need to stop being a nuisance and making noise. Licking and scratching. You need to stop. Take a nap. Back to listen while I work. I love it. Welcome back. Getting dark, yeah. That all was a little bit dark, right? With the bears and killing a folk. Ah, this is nice. Chapter 10. The Braided Man of Pyramid Mountain. The mountain before them was shaped like a cone and was so tall that its point was lost in the clouds. Directly facing the place where Jim had stopped was an arched opening leading to the broad stairway. The stairs were cut in the rock inside the mountain, and they were broad and not very steep because they were circled around like a corkscrew. And at the arched opening where the flight began, the circle was quite big. At the foot of the stairs was a sign reading, "Warning, these steps lead to the land of the gargoyles. Danger, keep out." "I wonder how Jim is ever going to draw the buggy up so many stairs," said Dorothy gravely. "No trouble at all," declared the horse with the contemptuous neigh. "Still, I don't care to drag any passengers. You'll all have to walk." "Suppose the stairs get steeper," suggested Zeb doubtfully. "Then you'll have to boost the buggy wheels, that's all," answered Jim. "We'll try it anyway," said the wizard. "It's the only way to get out of the Valley of Voe." So they began to ascend the stairs, Dorothy and the wizard first, Jim next, drawing the buggy, and then Zeb to watch that nothing happened to the harness. The light was dim, and soon they mounted into total darkness, so that the wizard was obliged to get out his lanterns to light the way. But this enabled them to proceed steadily until they came to the landing, where there was a rift in the side of the mountain that let in both light and air. Looking through this opening, they could see the Valley of Voe lying far below them, the cottages seeming like toy houses from that distance. After resting a few moments, they resumed their climb, and still the stairs were broad and low enough for Jim to draw the buggy easily after him. The old horse panted a little, and had stopped often to get his breath at such times that they were all glad to wait for him, and continually climbing up the stairs is sure to make one's legs ache. They wound about, always going upward for some time. The lights from the lanterns dimly shone the way, but it was a gloomy journey, and they were pleased when the broad streak of light ahead assured them they were coming to a second landing. Here, one side of the mountain had a great hole in it, like the mouth of a cavern, and the stairs stopped at the near edge of the floor and commenced descending again in the opposite edge. The opening at the mountain was on the side opposite to the Valley of Voe, and our travelers looked out upon the strange scene. Below them was a vast space, at the bottom of which was a black sea with rolling billows, through which little tongues of flame constantly shot up. Just above them, and almost on a level with their platform, were banks of rolling clouds which consistently shifted position and changed colors. The blues and grays were very beautiful, and Dorothy noticed that on the cloud banks sat or reclined fleecily shadowed forms of beautiful beings who must have been the cloud fairies, mortals who stand upon the earth and look up at the sky. Cannot often distinguish these forms, but our friends were now so near to the clouds that they observed the dainty fairies very clearly. "Are they real?" asked Zeb in an odd voice. "Of course," replied Dorothy softly. "They are the cloud fairies." "They seem like open work," reminded the boy, gazing intently. "If I should squeeze one, there wouldn't be anything left of it." In the open space between the clouds and the black, bubbling sea far beneath them, could be seen an occasional strange bird winging its way swiftly through the air. These birds were of enormous size and reminded Zeb of the rocks he had read about in the Arabian Nights. They had fierce eyes and sharp talons and beaks, and the children hoped none of them would venture into the cavern. "Well, I declare," suddenly exclaimed the little wizard. "What in the world is this?" They turned around and found a man standing on the floor in the center of the cave, who bowed very politely when he saw he had attracted their attention. He was a very old man, bent nearly double, but the queerest thing about him was his white hair and beard. These were so long that they reached to his feet, and both the hair and his beard were carefully plaited into many braids, and at the end of each braid fastened with a bow of colored ribbon. "Where did you come from?" asked Dorothy wonderingly. No place at all, answered the man with the braids. That is, not recently. Once I lived on top of the earth, but for many years I have had my factory in this spot, halfway up Pyramid Mountain. We are only halfway up? Inquired the boy in a discouraged tone. I believe so, my lad, replied the braided man. But as I have never been in either direction, down nor up, since I arrived, I cannot be positive whether it is exactly halfway or not. Have you a factory in this place? Asked the wizard, who had been examining the strange personage very carefully. To be sure, said the other. I am a great inventor, you must know. I manufacture my products in this lonely spot. What are your products? Inquired the wizard. Well, I make assorted flutters for flags and bunting, and the superior grade of rustles for ladies' silk gowns. I thought so, said the wizard with a sigh. May we examine some of these articles? Yes, indeed. Come into my shop, please. And the braided man turned and led the way into a smaller cave, where he evidently lived. Here, on the broad shelf, were several cardboard boxes of various sizes, each tied with a cotton cord. This, said the man, taking up a box and handling it gently, contains 12 dozen rustles, enough to last any lady a year. Will you buy it, my dear? He asked, addressing Dorothy. My gown isn't silk, she said, smiling. Never mind. When you open the box, the rustles will escape, whether you are wearing silk dress or not, said the man seriously. Then he picked up another box. In this, he continued, are many assorted flutters. They are invaluable to make flags flutter on a still day when there is no wind. You, sir, turning to the wizard, ought to have this assortment. Once you have tried my goods, I am sure you will never be without them. I have no money with me, said the wizard evasively. I do not want money, returned the braided man, for I could not spend it in this deserted place if I had it. But I would very much like the blue hair ribbon. You will notice my braids are tied with yellow, pink, brown, red, green, white, and black, but I have no blue ribbons. I'll get you one, cried Dorothy, who was sorry for the poor man, so she ran back to the buggy and took from her suitcase a pretty blue ribbon. It did her good to see how the braided man's eyes sparkled when he received this treasure. You have made me very, very happy, my dear, he exclaimed, and then he insisted on the wizard taking the box of flutters and the little girl accepting the box of rustles. You may need them some time, he said, and there is really no use in my manufacturing these things unless somebody uses them. Why did you leave the surface of the earth? Inquired the wizard. I could not help it. It is a sad story, but if you will try to restrain your tears, I will tell you about it. On Earth, I was a manufacturer of imported holes for American Swiss cheese, and I will acknowledge that I supplied a superior article, which was in great demand. Also, I made pores for porous plasters and high-grade holes for donuts and buttons. Finally, I invented a new adjustable post hole, which I thought would make my fortune. I manufactured a large quantity of these post holes, and having no room in which to store them, I set them at the end to end and put the top one on the ground. That made an extraordinarily long hole, as you could imagine, and reached far down into the earth. And as I leaned over it to try to see the bottom, I lost my balance and tumbled in. Unfortunately, the hole led directly into the vast space you see outside this mountain. But I managed to catch a point of rock that projected from this cavern, and so saved myself from tumbling headlong into the black waves beneath, where the tongues of flame that dart out would certainly have consumed me. Here, then, I made my home, and although it is a lonely place, I amuse myself by making rustles and flutters, and so get along very nicely. When the braided man had completed the strange tale, Dorothy nearly laughed because it was all so absurd. But the wizard tapped his forehead significantly to indicate that he thought the poor man was crazy, so they politely bade him good day and went back to the outer cavern to resume their journey. Okay, crazy bearded braided man of the mountain. Interesting. My phone was actually charging better than without the adapter in it. That's funny. appreciate you guys being here, truly. Hope you're enjoying the story thus far. Yeah, he likes the blue ribbon. Gotta have the blue ribbon, every color of the rainbow. I wonder if he gets anything for obtaining them all. Like the Infinity Stones. Yes, sir. What's up, Ancient Meal? I hope you're doing well tonight, bud. Appreciate you popping in. And enjoying the nice relax and read tonight on this Monday, Labor Day. We are going to start chapter 11, one I'm excited for because, I don't know, I love gargoyles. And not just the animated cartoon that was around when we were kids. I mean, like, the gargoyles themselves and the concept behind them, the lore and the theory. I think it's just super cool. But they meet the wooden gargoyles. Wooden gargoyles are something I've never seen. Let's find out what they're talking about. Chapter 11. Oh, me too. Excellent. I love that. And primarily why I started these. And then the community, Pokey Ghost Town, they decided, because I put up a few days that I could do this. Monday was the one that won. And it was for that exact reason, just let it all melt away. Forgot about that show. Yeah, it was a great show. And definitely like more advanced for kids. There was kid elements, but the finale of that show sticks with me. It truly does. Like the Enchanted Forest Chronicles or the Cranky Gargoyles. Excellent. Cranky Gargoyles are the best. They meet the wooden gargoyles, chapter 11. Get one more of this. I'm drinking maple bourbon coffee. Sans the bourbon. Oh, I can't ruin it. Nor relive it. So, but I think the biggest thing for me, if I remember correctly, is they just never came back to continue it. So it was one of those perpetual cliffhangers. Chapter 11. Another breathless climb brought our adventurers to a third landing, where there was a rift in the mountain. On peering out, all they could see was a rolling banks of clouds, so thick that they obscured all else. But the travelers were obliged to rest, and while they were sitting on the rocky floor, the wizard felt in his pockets and brought out the 9 tiny piglets. To his delight, they were all now plainly visible, which proved that they had passed beyond the influence of the magical valley of Baum. "Why, we can see each other again," cried one joyfully. "Yes," sighed Eureka, "and I can also see you again, and the sight makes me dreadfully hungry. Please, Mr. Wizard, may I eat just one of the fat little piggies? You'd never miss one of them, I'm sure." "What a horrid savage beast," exclaimed a piglet. "And after we've been such good friends, too, and played with one another." "When I'm not hungry, I love to play with you all," said the kitten demurely. "But when my stomach is empty, it seems that nothing will fill it so nicely as a fat piglet." "And we trusted you so," said another of the 9 reproachfully. "And thought you were respectable," said another. "It seems we were mistaken," declared a third, looking at the kitten timorously. "No one with such murderous desires should belong to our party, I'm sure." "You see, Eureka," remarked Dorothy reprovingly, "you are making yourself disliked. There are certain things proper for a kitten to eat, but I never heard of a kitten eating a pig under any circumstances." "Did you ever see such little pigs before?" asked a kitten. "They are no bigger than mice, and I'm sure mice are proper for me to eat." "It isn't the bigness, dear, it is the variety," replied the girl. "These are Mr. Wizard's pets, just as you are my pet, and it wouldn't be any more proper for you to eat them than it would for Jim to eat you." "And that's just what I shall do if you don't let those little balls of pork alone," said Jim, glaring at the kitten with his big round eyes. "If you injure any one of them, I'll chew you up instantly." The kitten looked at the horse thoughtfully, as if trying to decide whether he meant it or not. "In that case," she said, "I'll leave them alone. You haven't many teeth left, Jim, and the few you have are sharp enough to make me shudder. So the piglets will be perfectly safe hereafter, as far as I'm concerned." "That is right, Eureka," remarked the wizard earnestly. Let us all be happy family and love one another." Eureka yawned and stretched herself. "I always loved the piglets," she said, "but they don't love me." "No one can love a person he's afraid of," asserted Dorothy. "If you behave and don't scare the little pigs, I'm sure they'll grow very fond of you." The wizard now put the 9 tiny ones back into his pocket, and the journey was resumed. "We must be pretty near the top now," said the boy as they climbed wearily up the dark, winding staircase. "The country of the gargoyles can't be far from the top of the earth," remarked Dorothy. "It isn't very nice down here. I'd like to get home again, I'm sure." No one replied to this because they found they needed all their breath for the climb. The stairs had become narrower, and Zeb and the wizard often had to help Jim pull the buggy from one step to another, or keep him from jamming against the rocky walls. At last, however, a dim light appeared ahead of them, which grew clearer and stronger as they advanced. "Thank goodness we are nearly there," panted the little wizard. Jim, who was in advance, saw the last stair before him and struck his head above the rocky sides of the stairway. Then he halted, ducked down, and began to back up, so he nearly fell with the buggy onto the others. "Let's go down again," he said in his hoarse voice. "Nonsense," snapped the tired wizard. "What's the matter with you, old man?" "Everything," grumbled the horse. "I've taken a look at this place, and it's no fit country for real creatures to go to. Everything's dead up there. No flesh or blood or growing thing anywhere." "Never mind, we can't turn back," said Dorothy. "And we don't intend to stay here anyhow." "It's dangerous," growled Jim in a stubborn tone. "See here, my good steed," broke in the wizard. "Little Dorothy and I have been in many queer countries in our travels and always escaped without harm. We have been to the marvelous land of Oz, haven't we, Dorothy? So we don't much care for the country of the gargoyles is like. So we don't much care what the country of the gargoyles is like. Go ahead, Jim, and whatever happens, we'll make the best of it." "All right," answered the horse. "This is your excursion and not mine, so if you get into trouble, don't blame me." With this speech, he bent forward and dragged the buggy up the remaining steps. The others followed, and soon they were all standing upon the broad platform and gazing at the most curious and startling sight their eyes have ever beheld. "The country of the gargoyles is all wooden," exclaimed Zeb, and so it was. The ground was sawdust, and the pebbles scattered about were hard knots from the trees, worn smooth in course of time. There were odd wooden houses with carved wooden flowers in the front yards. The tree trunks were of coarse wood, and the leaves of the trees were shavings, and patches of grass were splinters of wood, and where neither grass nor sawdust showed was a solid wooden flooring. Wooden birds fluttered among the trees, and wooden cows were browsing upon the wooden grass. But the most amazing thing of all were the wooden people, the creatures known as gargoyles. These were very numerous, for the place was thickly inhabited, and a large group of queer people clustered near, gazing sharply upon the strangers who had emerged from the long spiral stairway. The gargoyles were very small in stature, but less than 3 feet in height. Their bodies were round, their legs short and thick, and their arms extraordinarily long and stout. Their heads were too big for their bodies, and their faces were decidedly ugly to look upon. Some had long, curved noses and chins, small eyes, and wide, grinning mouths. Others had flat noses, protruding eyes, and ears that were shaped like those of an elephant. There were many types, indeed, scarcely 2 being unalike, but all were equally disagreeable in appearance. The tops of their heads had no hair, and were carved into a variety of fantastic shapes. Some having a row of points or balls around the top, others designs resembling flowers or vegetables, and still others having squares that looked like waffles cut crisscross on their heads. They all wore short wooden wings, which were fastened to their wooden bodies by means of wooden hinges with wooden screws, and with these wings they flew swiftly and noiselessly, here and there, their legs being of little use to them. The noiseless motion was one of the most peculiar things about the gargoyles. They made no sounds at all, either in flying or trying to speak, and they conversed mainly by means of quick signals made with their wooden fingers or lips. Neither was there any sound to be heard anywhere throughout the wooden country. The birds did not sing, nor did the cows moo. Yet there was more than ordinary activity everywhere. The group of these queer creatures the group of these queer creatures, which was discovered clustered near the stairs at the first, remained staring and motionless, glaring with evil eyes at the intruders who had so suddenly appeared in their land. In turn, the wizard and the children, and the horse and the kitten, examined the gargoyles with the same silent attention. "There's going to be trouble, I'm sure," remarked the horse. "Unhitch those tugs, Zeb, and set me free from the buggy so I can fight comfortably." "Jim's right," sighed the wizard. "There's going to be trouble, and my sword isn't stout enough to cut up those wooden bodies, so I shall have to get out my revolvers." He got a satchel from the buggy and, opening it, took out two deadly-looking revolvers that made the children shrink back in alarm just to look at. "What harm can gurgles do?" asked Dorothy. "There's no weapon to hurt us with." "They have no weapons to hurt us with. Each of their arms is a wooden club," answered the little man, "and I'm sure these creatures mean mischief. By the looks of their eyes, even these revolvers can merely succeed in damaging a few of their wooden bodies, and after that we will be at their mercy." "But why fight at all in that case?" asked the girl. "So I may die with a clear conscience," returned the wizard gravely. "It's every man's duty to do the best he knows how, and I'm going to do it." "I wish I had an axe," said Zeb, who by now was unhitched the horse. "If we had known we were coming, we might have brought along several other useful things," responded the wizard, "but we dropped into this adventure rather unexpectedly." The gargoyles were backed away in the distance when they heard the sound of talking, for although our friends had spoken in low tones, their words seemed loud in the silence surrounding them. But as soon as the conversation ceased, the grinning, ugly creatures arose in a flock and flew swiftly toward the strangers. Their long arms stretched out before them like the bowsprits of the fleet of sailboats. The horse had especially attracted their notice because it was the biggest and strangest creature they had ever seen, so it became the center of their first attack. But Jim was ready for them, and when he saw them coming, he turned his heels toward them and began kicking out as hard as he could. Crack, crash, bang! Went his iron-shod hooves against the wooden bodies of the gargoyles, and they were battered right and left with such force that they scattered like straws into the wind. But the noise and clatter seemed as dreadful to them as Jim's heels, for all who were able swiftly turned and flew away to a distance. The others picked themselves up from the ground one by one and quickly rejoined their fellows. So for a moment the horse thought he had won the fight with ease. But the wizard was not so confident. "Those wooden things are impossible to hurt," he said, "and all the damage Jim has done to them is to knock a few splinters from their nose and ears. That cannot make them look any uglier, I'm sure, and it is my opinion they will soon renew the attack." "What made them fly away?" asked Dorothy. "The noise, of course. Don't you remember how the champion escaped them by shouting his battle cry?" "Suppose we escape down the stairs, too," suggested the boy. "We have time just now, and I'd rather face the invisible bears than those wooden imps." "No," returned Dorothy stoutly. It wouldn't do to go back, for then we would never get home. Let's fight it out." "That is what I advise," said the wizard. "They haven't defeated us yet, and Jim is worth a whole army." But the gargoyles were clever enough not to attack the horse the next time. They advanced in a great swarm, having been joined by many more of their kind, and they flew straight over Jim's head to where the others were standing. The wizard raised one of his revolvers and fired into the throng of his enemies, and the shot resounded like the clap of thunder in the silent place. Some of the wooden beings fell flat upon the ground, where they quivered and trembled in every limb, but most of them managed to wheel and escape again to the distance. Zeb ran and picked up one of the gargoyles that lay nearest him. The top of his head was carved into a crown, and the wizard's bullet had struck exactly in the left eye, which was a hard wooden knot. Half of the bullet stuck in the wood and half stuck out, so it had been the jar and the sudden noise that had knocked the creature down, more than the fact that it was really hurt. Before this crown gargoyle had recovered himself, Zeb had wound a strap several times around its body, confining its wings and arms so that it could not move. Then, having tied the wooden creature securely, the boy buckled a strap and tossed his prisoner into the buggy by the time the others had all retired. Whew, getting live. I'm sure they would, Mike. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mama. I appreciate you being here, and I love you. Thank you for being here. Driving home, BRB, no worries at all. No worries at all. I hope work was good work. Everybody that doesn't know, LA Thunder is my mom, Mama Ghost. And let's get into chapter 12, A Wonderful Escape. About an hour into it already. Kind of just zoning out reading. It's kind of nice. A Wonderful Escape. Sounds like a wonderful escape already, in my opinion. For a while, the enemy hesitated to renew the attack. Then a few of them advanced until another shot from the wizard's revolver made them retreat. That's fine, said Zeb. We've got him on the run now, sure enough. But only for a time, replied the wizard, shaking his head gloomily. These revolvers are good for 6 shots each, but when those are gone, we shall be helpless. The gargoyles seemed to realize this, for they sent a few of their band each time, after time, to attack the strangers and draw the fire from the little man's revolvers. In this way, none of them was shocked by the dreadful report more than once, for the main band kept far away, and each time a new company was sent into the battle. When the wizard had fired all of his 12 bullets, he had caused no damage to the enemy except to stun a few by the noise, and so be as no nearer to victory than in the beginning of the fray. What shall we do now? Asked Dorothy anxiously. Let's yell all together, said Zeb. And fight at the same time, added the wizard. And we'll get near Jim so that he can help us, and each one must take some weapon and do the best he can. I'll use my sword, although it isn't much account in this affair. Dorothy must take her parasol and open it suddenly when the wooden folk attack her. I hadn't anything for you, Zeb. I'll use the king, said the boy, and pulled his prisoner out of his buggy and bound Gargoyle's arms extended far out beyond its head. So by grasping its wrist, Zeb found the king made a very good club. The boy was strong for one of his years, having always worked upon a farm, so he was likely to prove more dangerous to his enemy than the wizard. When the next company of gargoyles advanced, our adventurers began yelling as if they had gone mad. Even the kitten gave a dreadful shrill scream. At the same time, Jim, the cab horse, neighed loudly. This daunted the enemy for a time, but the defenders were soon out of breath. Perceiving this, as well as the fact that there were no more of the awful bangs to come from the revolvers, the gargoyles advanced in a swarm as thick as bees, so the air was filled with them. Dorothy squatted upon the ground and put up her parasol, which nearly covered her and provided a great protection. The wizard's sword blade snapped into a dozen pieces at the first blow he struck against the wooden people. Zeb pounded away with the gargoyle he was using as a club until he had knocked down dozens of foes, but at last they clustered so thickly about him that he could no longer have room in which to swing his arms. The horse performed some wonderful kicking, and even Eureka assisted when she leaped bodily upon the gargoyles and scratched at them a bit like a wildcat. But all this bravery amounted to nothing at all. The wooden things wound their long arms around Zeb and the wizard and held them fast. Dorothy was captured in the same way, and numbers of the gargoyles clung to Jim's legs, so weighing him down, that the poor beast was helpless. Eureka made a desperate dash to escape and scampered along the ground like a streak, but a grinning gargoyle flew after her and grabbed her before she had gone very far. All of them expected nothing less than instant death, but to their surprise, the wooden creatures flew into the air with them and bore them far away, over miles and miles of wooden country, until they came to a wooden city. The houses of the city had made many corners, being square and 6-sided and 8-sided. They were tower-like in shape, and the best of them seemed old and weather-worn, yet all were strong and substantial. To one of these houses, which had neither doors nor windows, but only one broad opening far up underneath the roof, the prisoners were brought by their captors. The gargoyles roughly pushed them into the opening, where there was a platform, and then flew away and left them. As they had no wings, the strangers could not fly away, and if they jumped down from such a height, they would surely be killed. The creatures had sense enough to reason that way, and the only mistake they made was in supposing the Earth people were unable to overcome such ordinary difficulties. Jim was brought with the others, although it took a good many gargoyles to carry the big beast through the air and land him on the high platform. And the buggy was thrust in after him because it belonged to the party, and the wooden folks had no idea what it was used for or whether it was alive or not. When Eureka's captors had thrown the kitten after the others at last, the last gargoyle silently disappeared, leaving our friends to breathe freely once more. "What an awful fight," said Dorothy, catching her breath in little gasps. "Oh, I don't know," purred Eureka, smoothing her ruffled fur with her paw. "We didn't manage to hurt anybody, and nobody managed to hurt us." "Thank goodness we're all together again, even if we are prisoners," sighed the little girl. I wonder why they didn't kill us on the spot," remarked Zeb, who had lost his king in the struggle. "They are probably keeping us for some ceremony," the wizard answered reflectively. "But there's no doubt they intend to kill us as dead as possible in a short time." "As dead as possible would be pretty dead, wouldn't it?" asked Dorothy. "Yes, my dear. But we have no need to worry about that just now. Let us examine our prison and see what it is like." The space underneath the roof where they stood permitted them to see on all sides of the tall building, and they looked with much curiosity at the city spread out beneath them. Everything visible was made of wood, and the scene seemed stiff and extremely unnatural. From their platform, a stair descended into the house, and the children and the wizard explored it after lighting a lantern to show them the way. Several stories of empty rooms rewarded their search, but nothing more. So after a time, they came back to the platform again. Had there been any doors or windows in the lower rooms, or had not the boards of the house been so thick and stout, escape could have been easy. But to remain down below was like being in a cellar or in a hold of a ship, and they did not like the darkness or the damp smell. In this country, as in all others they had visited, underneath the earth's surface there was no night, a constant and strong light coming from some unknown source. Looking out, they could see into some of the houses near them, where there were open windows in abundance, and were able to make the forms of some wooden gargoyles moving about in their dwellings. "This seems to be their time of rest," observed the wizard. "All people need rest, even if they're made of wood. And as there's no night here, they select a certain time of day in which to sleep or doze." "I feel sleepy myself," remarked Zeb, yawning. "Why, where's Eureka?" cried Dorothy suddenly. They all looked around, but the kitten was no place to be seen. "She's gone out for a walk," said Jim gruffly. "Where, on the roof?" asked the girl. "No, she just dug her claws into the wood and climbed down the sides of the house to the ground." "She couldn't climb down, Jim," said Dorothy. "To climb means to go up." "Who said so?" demanded the horse. "My school teacher said so, and she knows a lot, Jim." "To climb down is sometimes used as a figure of speech," remarked the wizard. "Well, this is a figure of cat," said Jim, "and she went down, anyhow, whether she climbed or crept." "Dear me, how careless Eureka is," exclaimed the girl, much distressed. "The gurgles will get her for sure." "Ha ha," chuckled the old cab horse. "They're not gurgles, little maid, they're gargoyles." "Never mind, they'll get Eureka, whatever they're called." "No, they won't," said the voice of the kitten, and Eureka herself crawled over the edge of the platform and sat down quietly upon the floor. "Wherever have you been, Eureka?" asked Dorothy sternly. "Watching the wooden folks. They're too funny for anything, Dorothy. Just now they're all going to bed, and what do you think? They unhook the hinges of their wings and put them in the corner until they wake up again." "What, the hinges?" "No, the wings. That, said Zeb, explains why the house is used by them for a prison. If any of the gargoyles act badly, they have to be a little man, and took her to one of the corners of the building. Do you see that big rock standing on the hillside yonder? He continued, pointing with his finger. Yes, it's a good way off, but I can see it, she replied. Well, inside that rock, which reaches up into the clouds, is an archway very much like the one we entered when we climbed the spiral staircase from the Valley of Baum. I'll get my spyglass, and then you can see it more plainly. He fetched a small but powerful telescope, which had been in his satchel, and by its aid the little girl clearly saw the opening. Where does it lead to? She asked. That I cannot tell, said the wizard, but we cannot now be far below the earth's surface, and that entrance may lead to another stairway that will bring us to the top of our world again, where we belong. So, if we had the wings, we could escape the gargoyles. We might fly to that rock and be saved. I'll get you the wings, said Zeb, who had thoughtfully listened to all of this. That is, if the kitten will show me where they are. But how can you get down? Inquired the girl wonderingly. For answer, Zeb began to unfasten Jim's harness, strap by strap, and to buckle one piece to another until he had made a long leather strip that would reach to the ground. I can climb down that all right, he said. No, you can't, remarked Jim with a twinkle in his round eye. You may go down, but you can only climb up. Well, I'll climb up when I get back then, said the boy with a laugh. Now, Eureka, you'll have to show me the way to those wings. You must be very quiet, warned the kitten, for if you make the least noise, the gargoyles will wake up. They can hear a pin drop. I'm not going to drop a pin, said Zeb. He had fastened one end of the strap to the wheel of the buggy, and now he let the line dangle over the side of the house. Be careful, cautioned Dorothy earnestly. I will, said the boy, and let himself slide over the edge. The girl and the wizard leaned over and watched Zeb work his way carefully downward, hand over hand until he stood upon the ground below. Eureka clung with her claws to the wooden side of the house and let herself down easily. Then, together, they crept away and to enter the low doorway of a neighboring dwelling. The watchers waited in breathless suspense until the boy again appeared, his arms now full of wooden wings. When he came to where the strap was hanging, he tied the wings in all a bunch to the end of the line, and the wizard drew them up. Then the line was let down again for Zeb to climb up by. Eureka quickly followed him, and soon they were all standing together upon the platform, with eight of the much-prized wooden wings beside them. The boy was no longer sleepy, but full of energy and excitement. He put the harness together again and hitched Jim to the buggy. Then, with the wizard's help, he tried to fasten some of the wings to the old cab horse. This was no easy task because half of each one of the hinges of the wings was missing, it being still fastened to the body of the gargoyle who had used it. However, the wizard went once more to a satchel, which seemed to contain a surprising variety of odds and ends, and brought out a spool of strong wire, by means of which they managed to fasten 4 of the wings to Jim's harness, 2 near his head and 2 near his tail. They were a bit wiggly, but secure enough that only the harness held together. The other 4 wings were then fastened to the buggy, 2 on each side, for the buggy must bear the weight of the children and the wizard as it flew through the air. These preparations had not consumed a great deal of time, but the sleeping gargoyles were beginning to wake up and move around, and soon some of them would be hunting for their missing wings. But the prisoners resolved to leave their prison at once. They mounted into the buggy, Dorothy holding Eureka safe in her lap. The girl sat in the middle of the seat, with Zeb and the wizard on each side of her. When all was ready, the boy shook the reins and said, "Fly away, Jim." Each wing must flop first. Which wings must I flop first? Asked the cab horse undecidedly. Flop them all together, suggested the wizard. Some of them are crooked, objected the horse. Never mind, we will steer with just the wings on the buggy, said Zeb. Just you light out and make for that rock, Jim. Don't waste any time about it either. So the horse gave a groan, flopped its 4 wings all together, and flew away from this platform. Dorothy was a little anxious about the success of their trip, for the way Jim arched his long neck and spread out his bony legs as he fluttered and floundered through the air was enough to make anybody nervous. He groaned, too, as if frightened, and the wings crinked dreadfully because the wizard had forgotten to oil them. But they kept fairly good time with the wings of the buggy, so that they made excellent progress from the start. The only thing that anyone could complain of with justice was the fact that they wobbled first up and then down as if the road were rocky instead of being as smooth as the air could make it. The main point, however, was that they flew and flew swiftly, if a bit unevenly toward the rock for which they had headed. Some of the gargoyles saw them presently and lost no time in collecting a band to pursue the escaping prisoners, so that when Dorothy happened to look back, she saw them coming in a great cloud that almost darkened the sky. Sorry, y'all. That just kind of, the last little bit started getting a little fuzzy. Hey, Johnny Knight, how's it going? Brangus McGee, it's always good to see you, fam. It is always good to see you. I hope everybody's having a beautiful Monday. I'm going to go and fill up my coffee real quick, and then we'll get into chapter 13. Only 7 more chapters to go in this story. Excellent. I didn't even realize if I have my microphone with me, I can probably talk and y'all can probably hear me as I go. Back to work tomorrow. And I have kind of missed it. So much so that I even logged in a little bit last night just so that I can make sure everything was taken care of that needed to be. Oh, sugar. But the only thing I'm really hoping is that typically when I come back from time away, the days themselves seem to be very long. All right. Fair enough. Absolutely. And depending on what time it is where you are, I would just say make some coffee. Never a bad idea. And whenever I'm streaming, I seem to have coffee myself. I think that's just to keep me alert and keep me nice and cool. But let's get into chapter 13, The Den of Dragonets. You are one vowel away from being a beloved Pokemon. Oh, matcha latte. That sounds pretty good too. Although I must say, I don't think I've ever had one, Alien. In fact, now that I think about it out loud, I can't say I've ever had matcha. Which might be a very bad thing to admit, but sounds good. A little bit of milk and hazelnut. Ooh, that's funny because I'm drinking maple bourbon flavored coffee right now, but the other flavor I have is in fact roasted hazelnut. Probably mostly see them as lattes in the US. Oh yeah. Okay, I got you. I might have to try one just to try it. Plenty of lattes I have had. Chapter 13, The Den of Dragonets. Our friends had a good start and were able to maintain it, for with their 8 wings they could go just as fast as could the gargoyles. All the way to the great rock the wooden people followed them, and when Jim finally alighted at the mouth of the cavern, the pursuers were still some distance away. "But I'm afraid they'll catch us yet," said Dorothy, greatly excited. "No, we must stop them," declared the wizard. "Quick, Zeb, help me pull off these wooden wings." They tore off the wings for which they had no further use, and the wizard piled them in a heap just outside the entrance of the cavern. Then he pored over them all the kerosene oil that was left in his oil can, and lighting a match, set fire to the pile. The flames leapt up at once, and the bonfire began to smoke and roar and crackle just as the great army of wooden gargoyles arrived. The creatures drew back at once, being filled with fear and horror for such a dreadful thing as fire, as had never before known in all the history of their wooden land. Inside the archway were several doors leading to different rooms built into the mountain, and Zeb and the wizard lifted these wooden doors from their hinges and tossed them all onto the flames. "That will prove a barrier for some time to come," said the little man, smiling pleasantly all over his wrinkled face at the success of their stratagem. "Perhaps the flames will set fire to all the miserable wooden country, and if it does, the loss will be very small, and the gargoyles never will be missed. But come, my children, let us explore the mountain and discover which way we must go in order to escape from this cavern, which is getting to be almost as hot as a baked oven." To their disappointment, there was within this mountain no regular flight of steps by means of which they could mount to the earth's surface. A sort of inclined tunnel led upward for a way, and they found the floor of it both rough and steep. Then a sudden turn brought them to a narrow gallery where the buggy could not pass. This delayed and bothered them for a while, because they did not wish to leave the buggy behind them. They carried their baggage and was useful to ride in whenever there were good roads. And since it had accompanied them so far in their travels, they felt it their duty to preserve it. So Zeb and the wizard set to work and took off the wheels and the top, and then they put the buggy edgewise so it could take up the smallest space. In this position, they managed, with the aid of the patient cab horse, to drag the vehicle through the narrow part of the passway. It was not a great distance, fortunately, and when the path grew broader, they put the buggy together again and proceeded more comfortably. But the road was nothing more than a series of rifts or cracks in the mountain, and it went zig-zag in every direction, slanting first up and then down until they were puzzled as to whether they were any nearer to the top of the earth than when they had started hours before. "Anyhow," said Dorothy, "we've escaped those awful gurgles, and it's one comfort." "Probably the gargoyles are still busy trying to put out the fire," returned the wizard. "But even if they succeeded in doing that, it would be very difficult for them to fly amongst these rocks, so I'm sure we need not fear them any longer." Once in a while, they would come to a deep crack in the floor, which made their way quite dangerous. But there was still enough oil in the lanterns to give them light, and the cracks were not so wide, but that they were able to jump over them. Sometimes they had to climb over heaps of loose rock, where Jim would scarcely drag the buggy. At such times, Dorothy, Zeb, and the wizard all pushed behind and lifted the wheels over the roughest places, so they managed, by a dint of hard work, to keep going. But the little party was both weary and discouraged when, at last, and turning a sharp corner, the wanderers found themselves in a vast cave arching high over their heads and having a smooth, level floor. The cave was circular in shape, and all around its edge, near to the ground, appeared groups of dull yellow lights, 2 of them being always side by side. These were motionless at first, but soon began to flicker more brightly and to sway slowly from side to side and then up and down. "What sort of place is this?" asked the boy, trying to see more clearly through the gloom. "I cannot imagine, I'm sure," answered the wizard, so peering about. "Woof!" snarled Eureka, arching her back until her hair stood on end. "It's den of alligators, or crocodiles, or some other dreadful creatures. Don't you see their terrible eyes?" "Eureka sees better in the dark than we can," whispered Dorothy. "Tell us, dear, what do the creatures look like?" she asked, addressing her pet. "I simply can't describe them," answered the kitten, shuddering. "Their eyes like pie plates, and their mouths like coal scuttles, but their body don't seem very big." "Where are they?" inquired the girl. "They're in little pockets all around the edge of this cavern. Oh, Dorothy, you can't imagine what horrid things they are. They're uglier than the gargoyles." "Tut, tut, be careful how you criticize your neighbors," spoke a rasping voice nearby. "As a matter of fact, you are rather ugly-looking creatures yourselves, and I'm sure Mother has often told us we were the loveliest and prettiest things in all the world." Hearing these words, our friends turned in the direction of the sound, and the wizard held his lantern so that their light would flood one of the little pockets in the rock. "Why, it's a dragon!" he exclaimed. "No," answered the owner of the big yellow eyes, which were blinking at them so steadily. "You are wrong about that. We hope to grow to be dragons someday, but just now we are only dragonettes." "What's that?" asked Dorothy, gazing fearfully at the great scaly head and yawning mouth and the big eyes. "Young dragons, of course, but we are not allowed to call ourselves real dragons until we get our full growth," was the reply. "The big dragons are very proud, and I don't think children amount to much. But Mother says that someday we will all be very powerful and important." "Where is your mother?" asked the wizard, anxiously looking around. "She has gone up to the top of the earth to hunt for our dinner. If she has good luck, she will bring us an elephant, or a brace of rhinoceros, or perhaps a few dozen people to stay our hunger." "Oh, are you hungry?" inquired Dorothy, drawing back. "Very," said the dragonette, snapping its jaws. And do you eat people?" "To be sure, and when we can get them. But they've been very scarce for a few years, and we usually have to be consistent with elephants or buffaloes," answered the creature in a regretful tone. "How old are you?" inquired Zeb, who stared at the yellow eyes as if fascinated. "Quite young, I grieve to say, and all my brothers and sisters that you see here are practically my own age. If I remember rightly, we are 66 years old the day before yesterday." "But that isn't young," cried Dorothy in amazement. "No?" drawled the dragonette. "It seems to me very babyish." "How old is your mother?" asked the girl. Mother's about 2,000 years old, but she carelessly lost track of her age a few centuries ago and skipped several hundred. She's a little fussy, you know, and afraid of growing old, being a widow and still in her prime." "I should think she would be," agreed Dorothy. Then, after a moment's thought, she asked, "Are we friends or enemies? I mean, will you be good to us, or you intend to eat us?" "As for that, we dragonettes would love to eat you, my child, but unfortunately Mother has tied all of our tails around the rocks at the back of our individual caves so that we cannot crawl out to get you. If you choose to come nearer, we will make you a mouthful of you in a wink, but unless you do, you will remain quite safe." There was a regretful accent in the creature's voice, and at the words all the other dragonettes sighed dismally. Dorothy felt relieved presently and asked, "Why did your mother tie your tails?" "Oh, she is sometimes gone for several weeks on her hunting trips, and if we are not tied up, we would crawl all over the mountain and fight with each other and get into a lot of mischief. Mother usually knows what she is about, but she made a mistake this time, for you are sure to escape us unless you come too nearer, and you probably won't do that." "No, indeed," said the little girl. "We don't wish to be eaten by such awful beasts." "Permit me to say," returned the dragonette, "that you are rather impolite to call us names, knowing that we cannot resent your insults. We consider ourselves very beautiful in appearance, for Mother has told us so, and she knows. And we are of excellent family and have a pedigree that I challenge any human to equal, as it extends back about 20,000 years, to that time of the most famous green dragon of Atlantis, who lived in the time when humans had not yet been created. Can you match that pedigree, little girl?" "Well," said Dorothy, "I was born on a farm in Kansas, and I guess that's being just as susceptible to haughty as living in a cave with your tail tied to a rock. If it isn't, I'll have to stand it, that's all." "Tastes differ," murmured the dragonette, slowly drooping its scaly eyelids over its yellow eyes until they looked like half-moons. Being reassured by the fact that the creatures could not crawl out of their rock pockets, the children and the wizard now took time to examine them more closely. The hands of the dragonettes were as big as barrels and covered with hard greenish scales that glittered brightly under the light of the lanterns. Their front legs, which grew just back of their heads, were also strong and big, but their bodies were small around. Then their heads, and dwindled away in a long line until their tails were slim as a shoestring. Dorothy thought, if it had taken them 66 years to grow to this size, that it would be a fully 100 years more before they could hope to call themselves dragons, and that seemed like a good while to wait to grow up. It occurs to me, said the wizard, that we ought to get out of this place before the mother dragon comes back. Don't hurry, called one of the dragonettes. Mother will be glad to meet you, I'm sure. You may be right, replied the wizard, but we are a little particular about associating with strangers. Will you kindly tell us which way your mother went to get us to the top of the earth? That is not a fair question to ask us, declared the other dragonette. For if we told you truly, you might escape us altogether, and if we told you an untruth, we would be naughty and deserve to be punished. Then, decided Dorothy, we must find our way the best we can. They circled all around the cavern, keeping a good distance away from the blinking yellow eyes of the dragonettes, and presently discovered that there were two paths leading from the wall opposite to the place that they had entered. They selected one of these at a venture and hurried along it as fast as they could go, for they had no idea when the mother dragon would be back, and were very anxious not to make her acquaintance. Chilling before bed. I love that. I hope you're doing well, Brian. When they make a move about my life, will you when they make a movie about your life, I will happily narrate it, Go Spencer. That is something I will do. I would watch/listen to that. You guys are too sweet. Too sweet. And I appreciate you guys, truly. I'm not ignorant. I know that my voice can be soothing. Of course, I wish it was a little bit more inflectious. I wish I didn't have to consciously put inflection in my voice, but this is something that I very much long to do, was read books to people. So you all are kind of, in short, making a dream come true for me. So I really appreciate you guys. Ozma. Ozma makes an appearance. I don't know if we've met Ozma yet in this book. Should we build a Lego now? Should you build a Lego now? You absolutely should. You absolutely should. I wish I had Lego to build. I have nothing left to build, but that doesn't mean I can't go and start showcasing some of my models that I have laying around a little bit closer on streams. I could do that. Appreciate you. I appreciate you, boo. Ozma uses the magic belt, chapter 14. Get some of this coffee. Ooh, that's a good question, Brangus. I would say that Symphonia probably has more of the cards that I would chase, like the SAR Acerola, but Brave would be cool so that I could also start knocking out that set a little bit. So I would have to confidently say Brave would be next if I had to choose. And Brave also has the Bulba in it, to Lori's point, which those three cards being illustrated by three separate artists, and one of them being an SAR, is very impressive to me. You're funny, Lori. Ozma uses the magic belt, which belonged to the Gnome King, mind you. They took it from her in the last book, and that's how they used it to send Dorothy home. For a considerable distance, the way led straight upward in a gentle incline, and the wanderers made such good progress that they grew hopeful and eager, thinking they might see sunshine at any minute. But at length they came unexpectedly upon a huge rock that shut off the passage and blocked them from proceeding a single step further. This rock was separate from the rest of the mountain, and was in motion, turning slowly around and around as if upon a pivot. When first they came to it, there was a solid wall before them, but presently it revolved until there was exposed a wide, smooth path across it to the other side. This appeared so unexpectedly that they were unprepared to take advantage of it at first, and allowed the rocky wall to swing around again before they had decided to pass over it. But they knew now that there was a means of escape, and so waited patiently until the path appeared for a second time. The children and the wizard rushed across the moving rock and sprang into the passage beyond, leading safely through a little out of landing safely, though a little out of breath. Jim, the cab horse, came last, and the rocky wall almost caught him, for just as he leapt to the floor for the further passage, the wall swung across it, and a loose stone that the buggy wheels knocked against fell into the narrow crack where the rock turned and became wedged there. They heard a crunching, grinding sound, a loud snap, and the turntable came to a stop with its broadest surface shutting off the path from which they had come. "Never mind," said Zeb. "We don't want to get back anyhow." "I'm not so sure of that," returned Dorothy. "The mother dragon may come down and catch us here." "It is possible," agreed the wizard, "if this proves to be the path she usually takes. But I have been examining this tunnel, and I do not see any signs of so large a beast having passed through it." "Then we're all right," said the girl, "for if a dragon went the other way, she can't possibly get to us now." "Of course not, my dear. But there is another thing to consider. The mother dragon probably knows the road to the Earth's surface, and if she went the other way, then we have come the wrong way," said the wizard thoughtfully. "Dear me," cried Dorothy. "That would be unlucky, wouldn't it?" "Very. Unless this passage also leads to the top of the Earth," said Zeb. "For my part, if we manage to get out of here, I'll be glad it isn't the way the dragon goes." "So will I," returned Dorothy. "It's enough to have your pedigree flung in your face by those saucy dragonettes. No one knows what the mother might do." They now moved on again, creeping slowly up another steep incline. The lanterns were beginning to grow dim, and the wizard poured the remaining oil from one into the other, so that the one light would last longer. But their journey was almost over, for in a short time they reached a small cave from which there was no further outlet. They did not realize their ill fortune at first, for their hearts were gladdened by the sight of a ray of sunshine coming through a small crack in the roof of the cave far overhead. That meant that their world, the real world, was not very far away, and that the succession of perilous adventures they had encountered had at last brought them near the Earth's surface, which meant home to them. But when the adventurers looked more carefully around them, they discovered that there was a strong prison that there were in a strong prison from which there was no hope of escape. "But we're almost on the Earth again," cried Dorothy, "for there is the sun, the most beautiful sun that shines." And she pointed eagerly at the crack in the distant roof. "Almost on Earth isn't being there," said the kitten in a discontented tone. "It wouldn't be possible for me to get up to that crack or through it if I got there." "It appears the path ends here," announced the wizard gloomily. "And there is no way to go back," added Zeb with a low whistle of perplexity. "I was sure it would come to this." "In the end," remarked the old cab horse, "folks don't fall into the middle of the earth and then get back again to tell their adventures, not in real life. And the whole thing has been unnatural because that cat and I are both able to talk your languages and to understand the words you say." "And so can 9 tiny piglets," added Eureka. "Don't forget them, for I may have to eat them after all." "I've heard animals talk before," said Dorothy, "and no harm came of it." "Were you ever before shut up in a cave far under the earth with no way of getting out?" inquired the horse seriously. "No," answered Dorothy, "but don't you lose heart, Jim, for I'm sure this isn't the end of our story by any means." The reference to the piglets reminded the wizard that his pets had not enjoyed much exercise lately, and must be tired of their prison in his pocket. So he sat down upon the floor of the cave and brought the piglets out one by one, and allowed them to run around as much as they pleased. "My dears," he said to them, "I'm afraid I've got you into a lot of trouble. and that you will never again be able to leave this gloomy cave." "What's wrong?" asked a piglet. "We've been in the dark quite a while, and you may as well explain what has happened." The wizard told them of the misfortune that had overtaken the wanderers. "Well," said another piglet, "you are a wizard, are you not?" "I am," replied the little man. "Then you can do a few whizzes and get us out of this hole," declared the tiny one with much confidence. "I could if I happened to be a real wizard," returned his master sadly. "But I'm not, my piggy wees. I'm a humbug wizard." "Nonsense!" cried several of the piglets together. "You can ask Dorothy," said the little man in an injured tone. "It's true enough," returned the girl earnestly. "Our friend Oz is merely a humbug wizard, for he once proved it to me. He can do several very wonderful things, if he knows how, but he can't whiz a single thing if he hasn't the tools and machinery to work with." "Thank you, my dear, for doing me justice," responded the wizard greatly. "To be accused of being a real wizard when I am not is a slander I will not tamely submit to. But I am one of the greatest humbug wizards that ever lived, and you will realize this when we have all starved together and our bones are scattered over the floor of this lonely cave." "I don't believe we'll realize anything when it comes to that," remarked Dorothy, who had been deep in thought. "But I'm not going to scatter my bones just yet, because I need them, and you probably need yours too." "We're helpless to escape," sighed the wizard. "We may be helpless," answered Dorothy, smiling at him, "but there are others who can do more than we can. Cheer up, friends. I'm sure Ozma will help us." "Ozma!" exclaimed the wizard. Who's Ozma?" "The girl that rules the marvelous land of Oz," was the reply. "She's a friend of mine, for I met her in the land of Ev not long ago and went to Oz with her." "For a second time?" asked the wizard with great interest. "Yes, the first time I went to Oz, I found you there ruling the Emerald City. After you went up in a balloon and escaped us, I got back to Kansas by means of a pair of magical silver shoes." "I remember those shoes," said the little man, nodding. "They once belonged to the Wicked Witch. Have them here with you?" "No, I lost them somewhere in the air," explained the child. "But the second time I went to the land of Oz, I owed the Gnome King's magic belt, which was much more powerful than were the magic shoes." "Where's that magic belt?" inquired the wizard, who had listened with great interest. "Ozma has it, for its powers won't work in a common, ordinary country like the United States. Anyone in a fairy country like the land of Oz can do anything with it, so I left it with my friend, the Princess Ozma, who used it to wish me in Australia with Uncle Henry." "And you were," asked Zeb, astonished at what he had heard. "Of course, in just a jiffy, and Ozma has an enchanted picture hanging in her room that shows her the exact scene where any of her friends may be. At any time she chooses, all she has to do is say, 'I wonder what so-and-so is doing.' And at once the picture shows where her friend is and what the friend is doing. That's real magic, Mr. Wizard, isn't it? Well, every day at 4 o'clock, Ozma has promised to look at me in that picture, and if I am in need of help, I am to make a certain sign, and she will put on the Gnome King's magic belt and wish me to be with her in Oz." "Do you mean that Princess Ozma will see this cave in her enchanted picture, and see all of it here, and what we're doing?" demanded Zeb. "Of course, when it is 4 o'clock, she replied, with a laugh at his startled expression. "And when you make a sign, she will bring you to her in the land of Oz," continued the boy. "That's it, exactly, by means of the magic belt." "Then," said the wizard, "you will be saved, little Dorothy, and I am very glad of it. The rest of us will die much more cheerfully than when we know you have escaped our sad fate." "I won't die cheerfully," protested the kitten. "There's nothing cheerful about dying that I could ever see, although they say a cat has 9 lives, so must die 9 times. "Have you ever died yet?" inquired the boy. "No, and I'm not anxious to begin," said Eureka. "Don't worry, dear," Dorothy exclaimed. "I'll hold you in my arms and take you with me." "Take us too," cried the 9 tiny piglets all in one breath. "Perhaps I can," answered Dorothy. "I'll try." "Couldn't you manage to hold me in your arms?" asked the cab horse. Dorothy laughed. "I'll do better than that," she promised, "for I can easily save you all
Once I am myself in the land of Oz. How? They asked. By using the magic belt. All I need to do is to wish you with me, and there you'll be, safe in the royal palace. Good, cried Zeb. I built that palace in the Emerald City too, remarked the wizard in a thoughtful tone, and I'd like to see them again, for I was very happy among the Munchkins and Winkies and Quadlings and Gillikins. Who are they? Asked the boy. The 4 nations that inhabit the land of Oz, was the reply. I wonder if they would treat me nicely if I went there again. Of course they would, declared Dorothy. They're still proud of their former wizard and often speak of you kindly. Do you happen to know what ever became of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow? He inquired. They live in Oz yet, said the girl, and they are very important people. And the Cowardly Lion? Oh, he lives there too, with his friend the Hungry Tiger, and Billina's there, because she liked the place better than Kansas and wouldn't go with me to Australia. I'm afraid I don't know the Hungry Tiger and Billina, said the wizard, shaking his head. Is Billina a girl? No, she's a yellow hen, and a great friend of mine. You're sure to like Billina, when you know her, asserted Dorothy. Your friends sound like a menagerie, remarked Zeb uneasily. Couldn't you wish me some safer place than Oz? Don't worry, replied the girl. You'll just love the folks in Oz when you get acquainted. What time is it, Mr. Wizard? The little man looked at his watch, a big silver one that he carried in his vest pocket. 3:30, he said. Then we must wait for half an hour, she continued, but it won't take long after that to carry us all to the Emerald City. They sat silently, thinking for a time, then Jim suddenly asked, Are there any horses in Oz? Only one, replied Dorothy, and he's a sawhorse. A what? A sawhorse. Princess Ozma once brought him to life with the witch powder when she was a boy. Was Ozma once a boy? Asked Zeb wonderingly. Yes, a wicked witch enchanted her so she could not rule her kingdom. But she's a girl now, and the sweetest, loveliest girl in all the world. A sawhorse is a thing they saw boards on, remarked Jim with a sniff. It is when it is not alive, acknowledged the girl. But this sawhorse can trot as fast as you can, Jim, and he's very wise, too. Pah! I'll race the miserable wooden donkey any day of the week, cried the cab horse. Dorothy did not reply to that. She felt that Jim would know more about the sawhorse later on. The time dragged wearily enough to the eager watchers, but finally the wizard announced that 4 o'clock had arrived, and Dorothy caught up the kitten and began to make the signal that had been agreed upon to the faraway invisible Ozma. Nothing seems to happen, said Zeb doubtfully. Oh, we must give Ozma time to put on the magic belt, replied the girl. She had scarcely spoken the words when she suddenly disappeared from the cave, and with her went the kitten. There had been no sound of any kind and no warning. One moment Dorothy sat beside them with the kitten in her lap, and a moment later the horse, the piglets, and the wizard and the boy were all that remained in the underground prison. I believe we will soon follow her, announced the wizard in a tone of great relief, for I know something about the magic of the fairyland that is called the Land of Oz. Let us be ready, for we may be sent for any minute. He put the piglet safely away in his pocket again, and then he and Zeb got into the buggy and sat expectantly upon the seat. Will it hurt? Asked the boy in a voice that trembled a little. Not at all, replied the wizard. It will happen as quick as a wink. And that was the way it did happen. The cab horse gave a nervous start, and Zeb began to rub his eyes to make sure he was not asleep. For they were in the streets of a beautiful emerald green city, bathed in the grateful green light that was especially pleasing to their eyes, and surrounded by merry-faced people in gorgeous green and gold costumes of many extraordinary designs. Before them was the jewel-studded gates of the magnificent palace, and now the gates opened slowly as if inviting them to enter the courtyard, where splendid flowers were blooming and pretty fountains shot their silvery sprays into the air. Zeb shook the reins to rouse the cab horse from its stupor of amazement, for the people were beginning to gather around and stare at the strangers. Giddy up, cried the boy, and at the word Jim slowly trotting into the courtyard and drew the buggy along the jeweled driveway to the great entrance of the royal palace. Bumblebees.
Bulby isn't brave, yep. Hey, Raphilosophy, I hope you're doing well, brother. No rush, Papa Spence. I still gotta go through your Destin and Journey list. Absolutely. And yes, so Mega Brave plus the Lucario is pretty cool. Although, side by side, Lucario and Gardevoir, I would take the Gardevoir all day. Well, that was exciting. And I just kind of love how they needed a way out of an endless prison cave. And, oh, we have a magic belt in Oz. And it just worked the first time. That's a nice little story arc there. As we go into Chapter 15, old friends are reunited. Now we're back in Oz, finally. It's been a minute. And I'm glad we're away from the land of O. Chapter 15, old friends are reunited. Many servants dressed in handsome uniforms stood ready to welcome the new arrivals. And when the wizard got out of the buggy, a pretty girl in green gown cried out in surprise, "Why, it's Oz, the wonderful wizard, come back again." The little man looked at her closely and then took both the maiden's hands in his and shook them cordially. "On my word," he exclaimed, "it's little Jellia Jam, as pert and pretty as ever." "Why not, Mr. Wizard?" asked Jellia, bowing low. "But I'm afraid you cannot rule the Emerald City as you used to, because we now have a beautiful princess whom everyone loves dearly." "And the people will not willingly part with her," added a tall soldier in the Captain General's uniform. The wizard turned to look at him. "Did you not wear green whiskers at one time?" he asked. "Yes," said the soldier, "but I shaved them off long ago, and since then I have risen from a private to be the chief general of the royal armies." "That's nice," said the little man, "but I assure you, my good people, that I do not wish to rule the Emerald City," he added earnestly. "In that case you are very welcome," cried all the servants, and it pleased the wizard to note the respect with which the royal retainers bowed before him. His fame had not been forgotten in the land of Oz by any means. "Where's Dorothy?" inquired Zeb anxiously, as he felt the buggy and stood beside his friend, the little wizard. "She is with the Princess Ozma, in the private rooms of the palace," replied Jellia Jam. "But she has ordered me to make you welcome and show you to your new apartments." The boy looked around him with wondering eyes. Such magnificence and wealth as was displayed in this palace was more than he had ever dreamed of, and he could scarcely believe that all the gorgeous glitter was real and not tinsel. "What's to become of me?" asked the horse uneasily. He had seen considerable of life in the cities in his younger days and knew that this regal palace was no place for him. It perplexed even Jellia Jam for a time to know what to do with the animal. The Green Maiden was much astonished at the sight of so unusual a creature, for horses were unknown in this land. But those who lived in the Emerald City were apt to be astonished by queer sights. So, after inspecting the cab horse and noting the mild look in his big eyes, the girl decided not to be afraid of him. "There are no stables here," said the wizard, "unless some have been built since I was away." "We have never needed them before," answered Jellia, "for the sawhorse lives in a room of the palace, being much smaller and more natural in appearance than this great beast you have brought with you." "Do you mean that I'm a freak?" asked Jim angrily. "Oh no," she hastened to say. "There may be many more like you in a place you come from, but in Oz any horse but a sawhorse is unusual." This mollified Jim a little bit, and after some thought, the Green Maiden decided to give the cab horse a room in the palace, such as a big building, having many rooms that were seldom in use. So Zeb unharnessed Jim, and several of the servants then led the horse around to the rear, where they selected a nice large apartment that he could have all to himself. Then Jellia said to the wizard, "Your own room, which was back of the great throne room, has been vacant ever since you left us. Would you like it again?" "Yes, indeed," returned the little man. "It will seem like being at home again, for I lived in that room for many, many years." He knew the way to it, and the servant followed him, carrying his satchel.
Zeb was also escorted to a room so grand and beautiful that he almost feared to sit in the chairs or lie upon the bed, lest he might dim their splendor. In the closets he discovered many fancy costumes of rich velvets and brocades, and one of the attendants told him to dress himself in any of the clothes that pleased him, and to be prepared to dine with the princess and Dorothy in an hour's time. Opening from the chamber was a fine bathroom having a marble tub with perfumed water, so the boy, still dazed by the novelty of his surroundings, indulged in a good bath, and then selected a maroon velvet costume with silver buttons to replace his own soiled and much worn clothing. There were silk stockings and soft leather slippers with diamond buckles to accompany his new costume, and when he was fully dressed, Zeb looked much more dignified and imposing than ever before in his life. He was all ready when an attendant came to escort him to the presence of the princess. He followed bashfully and was ushered into a room more dainty and attractive than it was splendid. Here he found Dorothy seated beside the young girl, so marvelously beautiful that the boy stopped suddenly with a gasp of admiration. But Dorothy sprang up and ran to seize her friend's hand, drawing him impulsively toward the lovely princess, who smiled most graciously upon her guests. Then the wizard entered, and his presence relieved the boy's embarrassment. The little man was cloaked in black velvet, with many sparkling emerald ornaments decorating his breast, but his bald head and wrinkled features made him appear more amusing than impressive. Ozma had been quite curious to meet the famous man who had built the Emerald City and united the Munchkins, Gillikins, Quadlings, and Winkies into one people. So when they were all four seated at the dinner table, the princess said, "Please tell me, Mr. Wizard, whether you called yourself Oz after this great country, or whether you believe my country is called Oz after you. It is a matter of that I have long wished to inquire about, because you are of a strange race, and my own name is Ozma. No one, I'm sure, is better able to explain this mystery than you." "That is true," answered the little wizard. "Therefore, it will give me pleasure to explain my connection with your country. In the first place, I must tell you that I was born in Omaha, and my father, who was a politician, named me Oscar Zoroaster Fadrig Isaac Norman Hinkle Emmanuel Ambrose Diggs, Diggs being the last name, because he could not think no more to go on before it. Taken altogether, it was a dreadfully long name to weigh down a poor innocent child, and one of the hardest lessons I ever learned was to remember my own name. When I grew up, I just called myself OZ, because all the other initials were Pinhead, Pinhead, which was a reflection of my intelligence. "Surely no one could blame you for cutting your name short," said Ozma sympathetically. "But didn't you cut it almost too short?" "Perhaps so," replied the wizard. When a young man, I ran away from home and joined the circus. I used to call myself a wizard and do tricks of ventriloquism." "What does that mean?" asked the princess. "Throwing my voice into any object I pleased to make it appear the object was speaking instead of me. Also, I began to make balloon ascensions. On my balloon and on all other articles I used in the circus, I painted the two initials OZ to show that those things belonged to me. One day, my balloon ran away with me and brought me across the deserts to this beautiful country. When the people saw me come from the sky, they naturally thought me some superior creature and bowed down before me. I told them I was a wizard and showed them some easy tricks that amazed them. And when they saw the initials painted on the balloon, they called me Oz." "Now I begin to understand," said the princess, smiling. "At the time," continued the wizard, busily eating his soup while talking, "there were 4 separate countries in this land. Each one with 4 beings ruled a witch. But the people thought my power was greater than that of the witches, and perhaps the witches thought so too, for they never dared oppose me. I ordered the Emerald City to be built just where the 4 countries cornered each other. And when it was completed, I announced myself the ruler of the land of Oz, which included all 4 countries of the Munchkins, the Gillikins, the Winkies, and the Quadlings. Over this land I ruled in peace for many years until I grew old and longed to see my native city once again. So when Dorothy was first blown to this place by a cyclone, I arranged to go away with her in a balloon. But the balloon escaped too soon and carried me back alone. After many adventures, I reached Omaha, only to find that all my old friends were dead or have moved away. So, having nothing else to do, I joined a circus again, and I made my balloon ascensions until the earthquake caught me. That's quite a history, said Ozma. But there is little more history about the Land of Oz that you do not seem to understand, perhaps for the reason that no one ever told it to you. Many years before you came here, this land was united under one ruler, as it is now, and that ruler's name was always Oz, which means in our language, great and good. Or if the ruler happened to be a woman, her name was always Ozma. But once upon a time, 4 witches leagued together to dispose of the king and rule the 4 parts of the kingdom themselves. So when the ruler, my grandfather, was hunting one day, the wicked witch named Mombi stole him and carried him away, keeping him a close prisoner. Then the witches divided up the kingdom and ruled the 4 parts of it until you came here. That was why the people were glad to see you, and why they thought from your initials that you were the rightful ruler. But at that time, said the wizard thoughtfully, there were 2 good witches and 2 wicked witches ruling this land. Yes, replied Ozma, because a good witch had conquered Mombi in the north, and Glinda the Good had conquered the evil witch in the south. But Mombi was still my grandfather's jailer, and afterward my father's jailer. When I was born, she transformed me into a boy, hoping that no one would ever recognize me and know that I was the rightful princess of the Land of Oz. But I escaped from her, and now the ruler of my people. I'm very glad of that, said the wizard, and I hope you will consider me one of your most faithful and devoted subjects. We owe a great deal to the wonderful wizard, continued the princess, for it was you who built this splendid emerald city. Your people built it, he answered. I only bossed the job, as we say in Omaha. But you ruled it wisely and well for many years, she said, and made the people proud of your magical art. So, as you are now too old to wander abroad and work in a circus, I offer you a home here as long as you live. You shall be the official wizard of my kingdom, and be treated with every respect and consideration. I accept your kind offer with gratitude, gracious princess, the little man said in a soft voice, and they could all see that teardrops were standing in his keen old eyes. It meant a good deal to him to secure a home like this. He's only a humbug wizard, though, said Dorothy, smiling at him. And that is the safest kind of a wizard to have, replied Ozma promptly. Oz can do some good tricks, humbug or no humbug, announced Zeb, who was now feeling more at ease. He shall amuse us with his tricks tomorrow, said the princess. I have sent messengers to summon all of Dorothy's old friends to meet her and give her a welcome, and they ought to arrive very soon now. Indeed, the dinner was no sooner finished than in rushed the Scarecrow to hug Dorothy in his padded arms and tell her how glad he was to see her again. And the wizard was also most heartily welcomed by the straw man, who was an important personage in the Land of Oz. How are your brains? Inquired the little humbug as he grasped the soft stuffed hands of his old friend. Working finely, answered the Scarecrow. I'm very certain, Oz, that you gave me the best brains in the world, for I can think with them day and night, when all other brains are fast asleep. How long did you rule the Emerald City after I left here? Was the next question. Quite a while, until I was conquered by a girl named General Ginger. But Ozma soon conquered her with the help of Glinda the Good, and after that I went to live with Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman. Just then a loud clanking was heard outside, and when the servant threw open the door, with a low bow, a yellow hen strutted in. Dorothy sprang forward and caught the fluffy fowl in her arms, uttering at the same time a glad cry. "Oh, Billina," she said, "how fat and sleek you've grown." "Why shouldn't I?" asked the hen in a sharp, clear voice. I live on the fat of the land, don't I, Ozma?" "You have everything you wish for," said the princess. Around Billina's neck was a string of beautiful pearls, and on her legs were bracelets of emeralds. She nestled herself comfortably in Dorothy's lap until the kitten gave a snarl of jealous anger and leaped up with a sharp claw, fiercely bared to strike Billina a blow. But the little girl gave the angry kitten such a severe cuff that it jumped down again without daring to scratch. How horrid of you, Eureka, cried Dorothy. Is that any way to treat my friends? You have queer friends, seems to me, replied the kitten in a surly tone. Seems to me the same way, said Billina scornfully. If that beastly cat is one of them. Look here, said Dorothy sternly. I won't have any quarreling in the land of Oz. I can tell you everybody lives in peace here and loves everybody else. And unless you two, Billina and Eureka, make up and be friends, I'll take my magic belt and wish you both home again. Immediately. So there. They were both much frightened at that threat and promised meekly to be good. But it was never noticed that they became very warm friends for all of that. And now the Tin Woodman arrived, his body most beautifully nickel-plated so that it shone splendidly in the brilliant light of the room. The Tin Woodman loved Dorothy most tenderly, and welcomed with joy the return of the little old wizard. Sir, said he to the latter, I never can thank you enough for the excellent heart you once gave me. It has made me many friends, I assure you, and it beats as kindly and lovingly today as it ever did. I am glad to hear that, said the wizard. I was afraid it would get moldy in that tin body of yours. Not at all, returned Nick Chopper. It keeps finely, being preserved in my all airtight chest. Zeb was a little shy when first introduced to these queer people, but they were so friendly and sincere that he soon grew to admire them very much, even finding some good qualities in the yellow hen. But he became nervous again when the next visitor was announced. This, said Princess Ozma, is my friend, Mr. H.M. Wogglebug T.E., who assisted me one time when I was in great distress, and is now the Dean of the Royal College of Athletic Science. Ah, said the wizard, I am pleased to meet so distinguished a personage. H.M., said the Wogglebug, pompously means highly magnified, and T.E. means thoroughly educated. I am, in reality, a very big bug, and doubtless the most intelligent being in all this broad domain. How well you disguise it, said the wizard, but I don't doubt your word in the least. Nobody doubts it, sir, replied the Wogglebug, and drawing a book from his pocket, the strange insect turned his back on the company and sat down on the corner to read. Nobody minded this rudeness, which might have seemed more impolite in one less thoroughly educated, so they straightway forgot him and joined in a merry conversation that kept them well amused until bedtime arrived. You as well, The Rock. I appreciate you. Guardy is super pretty, I agree. How's everyone doing? Everybody's doing well. I hope you're doing well, Adam Jones. It's good to see you. We are powering through this book here. I know these streams are typically around that 2-hour mark, but we only have 4 chapters left, including this one, so we're just going to power through the rest of the book tonight and call it good, so that we can start our next book next week and get back on our chapter game. So we are getting into chapter 16, which is Jim the Cab Horse, who is turning into probably one of my favorite characters in their little band of merry men. That's 16 likes already. Super appreciate you guys. Chapter 16, Jim the Cab Horse. Jim the Cab Horse found himself in possession of a large room with a green marble floor and carved marble wainscoting, which was so stately in its appearance that it would have awed anyone else. Jim accepted it as a mere detail, and at his command the attendants gave his coat a good rubbing, combed his mane and tail, and washed his hooves and fetlocks. Then they told him dinner would be served directly, and he replied that they could not serve it too quickly to suit his convenience. First they brought him a steaming bowl of soup, which the horse eyed in dismay. "Take that stuff away," he commanded. "Do you take me for a salamander?" They obeyed at once, and next served a fine large turbot on a silver platter with drawn gravy poured over it. "Fish?" cried Jim with a sniff. "Do you take me for a tomcat? Away with it." The servants were a little discouraged, but soon they brought in a great tray containing 24 nicely roasted quail on a toast. "Well, well," said the horse, now thoroughly provoked. Do you take me for a weasel? How stupid and ignorant you are in the land of Oz, and what dreadful things you feed upon. Is there nothing in this decent place to eat? The trembling servant sent for a royal steward, who came in haste and said, "What would your highness like for dinner?" "Highness," repeated Jim, who was unused to such titles. "You are at least 6 feet high, and that is higher than any other animal in this country," said the steward. "Well, my highness would like some oats," declared the horse. "Oats? We have no whole oats," the steward replied, with much deference. "But there is any quantity of oatmeal, which we often cook for breakfast. Oatmeal is a breakfast dish," added the steward humbly. "I'll make it a dinner dish," said Jim. "Fetch it on, but don't cook it, as you value your life." You see, the respect shown the worn-out old cab horse made him a little arrogant, and he forgot he was a guest, never having been treated otherwise than as a servant since the day he was born, until his arrival in the land of Oz. But the royal attendants did not heed the animal's ill temper. They soon mixed a tub of oatmeal with a little water, and Jim ate it with much relish. Then the servants heaped a lot of rugs upon the floor, and the old horse slept on the softest bed he had ever known in all his life. In the morning, as soon as it was daylight, he resolved to take a walk and try to find some grass for breakfast. So he ambled calmly through the handsome arch of the doorway, turned the corner of the palace, wherein all seemed asleep, and came face to face with the sawhorse. Jim stopped abruptly, being startled and amazed. The sawhorse stopped at the same time and stared at the other with its queer protruding eyes, which were mere knots in a log that formed his body. The legs of the sawhorse were 4 sticks, driving into holes bored into the log. Its tail was a small branch that had been left by accident, and its mouth a place chopped in one end of the body, which projected a little and served as a head. The ends of the wooden legs were shod with plates of solid gold, and the saddle of the Princess Ozma, which was red leather set with sparkling diamonds, was strapped on the clumsy box. "Will you stop, please? Lay down." Jim's eyes stuck out as much as those of the sawhorse, and he stared at the creature with his ears erect and his long head drawn back until it rested against his arched neck. In this comical position, the 2 horses circled slowly around each other for a while, each being unable to realize what the singular thing might be which it now beheld for the first time. Then Jim exclaimed, "For goodness sake, what sort of being are you?" "I'm a sawhorse," replied the other. "Oh, I believe I've heard of you," said the cab horse. "But you are unlike anything I expected to see." "I do not doubt it," the sawhorse observed, with a tone of pride. "I am considered quite unusual." "You are indeed, but a rickety wooden thing like you has no right to be alive." "I couldn't help it," returned the other, rather crestfallen. "Ozma sprinkled me with magic powder, and I just had to live. I know I'm not much account, but I'm the only horse in all the land of Oz, so they treat me with great respect." "You? A horse?" "Oh, not a real horse, of course. There are no real horses here at all, but I am splendid imitation of one." Jim gave an indignant sigh. "Look at me," he cried. "Behold a real horse." The wooden animal gave a start and then examined the other intently. "Is it possible that you are a real horse?" he murmured. "Not only possible, but true," replied Jim, who was gratified by the impression he had created. "It is proved by my fine points. For example, look at the long hairs on my tail, with which I can whisk away the flies." "The flies never trouble me," said the sawhorse. "And notice my great strong teeth, which I nibble the grass." "It's not necessary for me to eat," observed the sawhorse. "Also examine my broad chest, which enables me to draw deep, full breaths," said Jim proudly. "I have no need to breathe," returned the other. "No, you miss many pleasures," remarked the cab horse pityingly. "You do not know the relief of brushing away a fly that has bitten you, nor the delight of eating delicious food, nor the satisfaction of drawing a long breath of fresh, pure air. You may be an imitation of a horse, but you are a mighty poor one." "Oh, I cannot hope to ever be like you," sighed the Sawhorse, "but I am glad to meet at last a real horse. You are certainly the most beautiful creature I ever beheld." This praise won Jim completely. To be called beautiful was a novelty in this experience. Said he, "Your chief fault, my friend, is in being made of wood, and that I suppose you cannot help. Real horses like myself are made of flesh and blood and bones." "I can see the bones all right," replied the Sawhorse, "and they are admirable and distinct. Also, I can see the flesh, but the blood, I suppose, is tucked away inside?" "Exactly," said Jim. "What good is it?" asked the Sawhorse. Jim did not know, but he would not tell the Sawhorse that. "If anything cuts me," he replied, "the blood runs out to show where I am cut. You, poor thing, cannot even bleed when you are hurt." "But I am never hurt," said the Sawhorse. "Once in a while I get broken up some, but I am easily repaired and put in good order again. And I never feel a break or a splinter in the least." Jim was almost tempted to envy the wooden horse for being unable to feel pain, but the creature was so absurdly unnatural that he decided he would not change places with it in any circumstances. "How did you happen to be shod with gold?" he asked. "Princess Ozma did that," was the reply, "and it saves my legs from wearing out. We've had a good many adventures together, Ozma and I, and she likes me." The cab horse was about to reply when suddenly he gave a start and a neigh of terror and stood trembling like a leaf, for around the corner had come two enormous savage beasts, treading so lightly that they were upon him before he was even aware of their presence. Jim was in the act of plunging down the path to escape when the Sawhorse cried out, "Stop, my brother, stop! Real horse, these are my friends, and will do you no harm." Jim hesitated, eyeing the beast fearfully. One was an enormous lion with a clear, intelligent eyes, a tawny mane, bushy and well kept, and the body like yellow plush. The other was a great tiger with purple stripes around his lithe body, powerful limbs, and eyes that showed through the half-closed lids like coals of fire. The huge forms of these monarchs of the forest and jungle were enough to strike terror into the stoutest heart, and it is no wonder Jim was afraid to face them. But the Sawhorse introduced the stranger in a calm tone, saying, "This noble horse is my friend the Cowardly Lion, who is the valiant king of the forest, but at the same time a faithful vassal of Princess Ozma. And this is the Hungry Tiger, the terror of the jungle, who longs to devour fat babies, but is prevented by his conscience from doing so. These royal beasts are both warm friends of little Dorothy, and have come to the Emerald City this morning to welcome her to our fairyland." Hearing these words, Jim resolved to conquer his alarm. He bowed his head with the much dignity as he could muster toward the savage-looking beasts, who in return nodded in a friendly way. "Is not a real horse a beautiful animal?" asked the Sawhorse admiringly. "It is doubtless a matter of taste," returned the lion. "In the forest we would be thought ungainly, because his face is stretched out and his neck is uselessly long. His joints, I notice, are swollen and overgrown, and he lacks flesh in his olden years. And dreadfully tough," added the Hungry Tiger in a sad tone. "My conscience would never permit me to eat so tough a morsel as a real horse." "I'm glad of that," said Jim, "for I also have a conscience, and it tells me not to crush in your skull with a blow of my powerful hoof." If he thought to frighten the striped beast with such language, he was mistaken. The tiger seemed to smile and wink one eye slowly. "You have a good conscience, friend horse," it said, "and if you attend to its teachings, it will do much to protect you from harm. Some day I will let you try to crush my skull, and afterwards you will know more about tigers than you do now." "Any friend of Dorothy," remarked the Cowardly Lion, "must be our friend as well. So let us cease this talk of skull crushing and converse upon more pleasant subjects. Have you had breakfast yet, Sir Horse?" "Not yet," replied Jim. "But here is plenty of excellent clover, so if you will excuse me, I will eat now." "He's a vegetarian," remarked the tiger, as the horse began to munch the clover. "If I could eat grass, I would not need a conscience, for nothing could then tempt me to devour babies and lambs." Just then Dorothy, who had risen early and heard the voices of the animals, ran out to greet her old friends. She hugged both the lion and the tiger with eager delight, but seemed to love the king of the beasts a little better than she did this hungry friend, having known him a little longer. By this time, they had indulged in a good talk, and Dorothy had told them all about the awful earthquake and her recent adventure. The breakfast bell rang from the palace, and the little girl went inside to join her human comrades. As she entered the great hall, a voice called out in a rather hushed tone, "What? Are you here again?" "Yes, I am," she answered, looking all around to see where the voice came from. "What brought you back?" was the next question, and Dorothy's eyes rested on the antlered head hanging on the wall just over the fireplace, and caught its lips in the act of moving. "Good gracious," she exclaimed. "I thought you were stuffed." "So I am," replied the head. "But once on a time I was part of the Gump, which Ozma sprinkled with the powder of life. I was then for a time the head of the finest flying machine that had ever known to exist, and we did many wonderful things. Afterward, the Gump was taken apart, and I was put back on this wall, but I could still talk when I feel in the mood, which is not often." "It's very strange," said the girl. "What were you when you were first alive?" "That I have forgotten," replied the Gump's head, "and I do not think it is of much importance, but here comes Ozma, so I'd better hush up, for if the princess doesn't like me to chatter since she changed her name from Tip to Ozma." Just then, the girlish ruler of Oz opened the door and greeted Dorothy with a good morning kiss. The little princess seemed fresh and rosy and in good spirits. "Breakfast is served, dear," she said, "and I'm hungry, so don't let us keep it waiting a single minute." Ernie. How are you doing tonight, Ernie? Slept all day? Excellent. Getting hungry now? Yeah, right. Going through all that food. I agree. I hope you're doing well, Ernie. It's good to see you, brother. All right, let's take a look here. Okay. That's what I thought. The last chapter really isn't that long, so we are going to finish it tonight. Looks like they're going through all the characters now. We're getting into the 9 tiny piglets, which we've already met and have been traveling with Oz in his waistcoat. Or rather, the secret pocket in his jacket. Chapter 17, The 9 Tiny Piglets. After breakfast, Ozma announced that she had ordered a holiday to be observed throughout the Emerald City in honor of her visitors. The people had learned that their old wizard had returned to them, and all were anxious to see him again, for he had always been a rare favorite. So first there was to be a grand procession through the streets, after which the little old man was requested to perform some of his wizardries in the great throne room of the palace. In the afternoon, there were to be games and races. The procession was very imposing. First came the Imperial Cornet Band of Oz, dressed in emerald velvet uniforms with splashes of pea green satin and buttons of immense cut emeralds. They played the... Don't drop the book. They played the national air called the Oz Spangled Banner, and behind them were the standard bearers of the royal flag. This flag was divided into 4 quarters, one being colored sky blue, another pink, a third lavender, and the 4th white. In the center was a very large emerald green star, and all over the 4 corners were sewn spangles that glittered beautifully in the sunshine. The colors represented the 4 countries of Oz and the green star of the Emerald City. Just beyond the royal standard bearers came the Princess Ozma in her royal chariot, which was of gold encrusted with emeralds and diamonds set in exquisite designs. The chariot was drawn on this occasion by the Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger, who were decorated with immense pink and blue bows. In the chariot rode Ozma and Dorothy. the former in splendid remnant and wearing her royal coronet, while the little Kansas girl wore around her waist the magic belt she had once captured from the Gnome King. Following the chariot came the Scarecrow mounted on the Sawhorse, and the people cheered him almost as loud as they did their lovely ruler. Behind him stalked with regular jerky steps the famous machine man called Tick-Tock, who had been wound up by Dorothy for the occasion. Tick-Tock moved by clockwork and was made all of burnished copper. He really belonged to the Kansas girl, who had much respect for his thoughts after they had been properly wound and set going. But as the copper man would be useless in any place but a fairy country, Dorothy had left him in charge of Ozma, who saw that he was suitably cared for. There followed another band after this, which was called the Royal Court Band, because the members all lived in the palace. They wore white uniforms with real diamond buttons and played "What is Oz Without Ozma?" very sweetly. Then came Professor Wogglebug with a group of students from the Royal College of Scientific Athletics. The boys wore long hair and striped sweaters and yelled their college yell every other step they took, to the great satisfaction of the populace, which was glad to have this evidence that their lungs were in good condition. The brilliantly polished Tin Woodman marched next, at the head of the Royal Army of Oz, which consisted of 28 officers, from generals down to captains. There were no privates in this army, because all were so courageous and skillful that they had been promoted one by one until there were no privates left. Jim had the buggy followed, the cab horse being driven by Zeb, while the wizard stood up on the seat and bowed his bald head right and left and answered to the cheers of the people, who crowded thick about him. Taken altogether, the procession was a grand success, and when it had returned to the palace, the citizens crowded into the great throne room to see the wizard perform his tricks. The first thing the little humbug did was to produce a tiny white piglet from underneath his hat and pretend to pull it apart, making two. This act he repeated until all of the 9 little piglets were visible, and they were so glad to get out of his pocket that they ran around in a very lively manner. The pretty little creatures would have been a novelty anywhere, so the people were as amazed and delighted at their appearance as even the wizard could have desired. When he had made them all disappear again, Ozma declared she was sorry they were gone, for she wanted one of them to pet and play with. So the wizard pretended to take one of the piglets out of the hair of the princess, while really slyly took it from his inside pocket, and Ozma smiled joyously, as the creature nestled in her arms, and she promised to have an emerald collar made for his fat neck and to keep the little squealer always at hand to amuse her. Afterwards, it was noticed that the wizard always performed his famous trick with 8 piglets, but it seemed to please the people just as well as if there had been 9 of them. In his little room back of the throne room, the wizard had found a lot of things he had left behind when he went away in the balloon, for no one had occupied the apartment in his absence. There was enough material there to enable him to prepare several new tricks, which he had learned from some of the jugglers at the circus, and he had passed part of the night in getting them ready. So he followed the tricks of the 9 tiny piglets with several other wonderful feats that greatly delighted his audience, and the people did not seem to care a bit whether the little man was a humbug wizard or not, so long as he succeeded in amusing them. They applauded all of his tricks, and at the end of the performance begged him earnestly not to go away again and leave them. "In that case," said the little man gravely, "I will cancel all of my engagements before the crowded heads of Europe and America and devote myself to the people of Oz, for I love you all so well that I can't deny you nothing." I can deny you nothing, yeah. After the people had been dismissed with this promise, our friends joined Princess Ozma at an elaborate luncheon in the palace, where even the tiger and lion were sumptuously fed, and Jim the cab horse ate his oatmeal out of a golden bowl with several rows of rubies, sapphires, and diamonds set around the rim of it. In the afternoon, they all went to the great field outside the city gates, where the games were to be held. There was a beautiful canopy for Ozma and her guests to sit under and watch the people run races and jump and wrestle. You may be sure the folks of Oz did their best with such a distinguished company watching them, And finally Zeb offered to wrestle with the little munchkin, who seemed to be the champion. In appearance, he was twice as old as Zeb, for he had a long pointed whiskers and wore a peaked hat with little bells all around the brim of it, which tinkled gaily as he moved. But although the munchkin was hardly tall enough to come to Zeb's shoulder, he was so strong and clever that he laid the boy 3 times on his back with apparent ease. Zeb was greatly astonished at his defeat, and when the pretty princess joined her people in laughing at him, he proposed a boxing match with the munchkin, to which the little Ozite readily agreed. But the first time that Zeb managed to give him a sharp box on the ears, the munchkin sat down upon the ground and cried until the tears ran down his whiskers, because he had been hurt. This made Zeb laugh in turn, and the boy felt comforted to find that Ozma laughed as merrily at her weeping subject as she had him. Just then the Scarecrow proposed a race between the Sawhorse and the Cab-Horse, and although all others were delighted at the suggestion, the Sawhorse drew back, saying, "Such a race would not be fair." "Of course not," added Jim with a touch of scorn. "Those little wooden legs of yours are not half as long as my own." "Oh, it isn't that," said the Sawhorse modestly, "but I never tire, and you do." "Bah!" cried Jim, looking with great disdain at the other. "Do you imagine for an instant that such a shabby imitation of a horse as you are can run as fast as I can?" "I don't know, I'm sure," replied the Sawhorse. "That is what we're trying to find out," remarked the Scarecrow. "The object of the race is to see who can win it, or at least that is what my excellent brains think." "Once, when I was young," said Jim, "I was a racehorse, and defeated all who dared run against me." I was born in Kentucky, you know, where all the best and most aristocratic horses come from. "But you're old now, Jim," suggested Zeb. "Old? Why, I feel like a colt today," replied Jim. "I only wish there was a real horse here for me to race with. I'd show you people a fine sight, I can tell you." "Then why not race with the Sawhorse?" inquired the Scarecrow. "He's afraid," said Jim. "Oh, no," answered the Sawhorse. "I merely said it wasn't fair. But if my friend, the real horse, is willing to undertake the race, I am quite ready." So they unharnessed Jim and took the saddle off the Sawhorse, and the two queerly matched animals stood side by side for the start. "When I say go," Zeb called to them, "you must dig out and race until you reach those 3 trees you see over yonder. Then circle round them and come back again. The first one that passes the place where the princess sits shall be named the winner. Are you ready?" "I suppose I ought to give the wooden dummy a good start of me," growled Jim. "Never mind that," said the Sawhorse. "I'll do the best I can." "Go!" cried Zeb, and at that word the 2 horses leapt forward and the race begun. Jim's big hoof pounded away at the great rate, and although he did not look very graceful, he ran in a way to do credit to his Kentucky breeding. But the Sawhorse was swifter than the wind. Its wooden legs moved so fast that their twinkling could scarcely be seen, and although so much smaller than the Cab-Horse, it covered the ground much faster. Before they had reached the trees, the Sawhorse was far ahead, and the wooden animal returned to the starting place, as was being lustily cheered by the Ozites before Jim came panting up to the canopy where the princess and her friends were seated. I am sorry to record the fact that Jim was not only ashamed of his defeat, but for a moment lost control of his temper. As he looked at the comical face of the Sawhorse, he imagined that the creature was laughing at him. So in a fit of unreasonable anger, he turned around and made a vicious kick that sent his rival tumbling head over heels upon the ground, and broke off one of its legs and its left ear. An instant later, the tiger crouched and launched its huge body through the air, swift and resistless as a ball from a cannon. The beast struck Jim full on the shoulder and sent the astonished Cab-Horse rolling over and over, amid shouts of delight from the spectators who had been horrified by the ungracious act he had been guilty of. When Jim came to himself, he sat upon his haunches. He found the Cowardly Lion crouched on one side of him and the Hungry Tiger on the other, and their eyes were glowing like balls of fire. "I beg your pardon, I'm sure," said Jim meekly. I was wrong to kick the sawhorse, and I am sorry I became angry at him. He has won the race, and won it fairly. But what can a horse of flesh do against a tireless beast of wood? Hearing this apology, the tiger and the lion stopped lashing their tails and retreated with dignified steps to the side of the princess. No one must injure one of our friends in our presence, growled the lion, and Zeb ran to Jim and whispered that unless he controlled his temper in the future, he would probably be torn to pieces. Then the Tin Woodman cut a straight and strong limb from a tree with his gleaming axe and made a new leg with an end a new ear for the sawhorse. And when they had been securely fastened in place, Princess Ozma took the coronet from her own head and placed it upon that of the winner of the race. She said, "My friend, I award you for your swiftness by proclaiming you Prince of Horses, whether of wood or of flesh, and hereafter all other horses in the land of Oz, at least, must be considered imitations, and you, the real champion of your race." There was more applause at this, and then Ozma had the jeweled saddle replaced upon the sawhorse, and herself rode the victor back to the city at the head of the grand procession. "I ought to be a fairy," grumbled Jim as he slowly drew the buggy home, for to be just an ordinary horse in a fairy country is to be of no account whatever. "It's no place for us, Zeb." "It's lucky we got here, though," said the boy, and Jim thought of the dark cave and agreed with him. All right, tree left. The trial of Eureka the cat. Eureka's going on trial. I never heard of such things. Several days of festivity and merry-making followed, for such old friends did not often meet, and there was much to be told and talked over between them, and many amusements to be enjoyed in this delightful country. Ozma was happy to have Dorothy beside her, for girls of her own age, with whom it was proper for a princess to associate with, were very few, and often the youthful ruler of Oz was lonely for lack of companionship. It was the third morning after Dorothy's arrival, and she was sitting with Ozma and her friends in a reception room talking over old times when the princess said to her maid, "Please go to my boudoir, Jellia, and get the white piglet I left on the dressing table. I want to play with it." Jellia at once departed on the errand, and she was gone so long that they had almost forgotten her mission, when the green-robed maiden returned with the troubled face. "The piglet is not there, your highness," she said. "Not there?" exclaimed Ozma. "Are you sure?" "I have hunted in every part of the room," the maid replied. "Was not the door closed?" asked the princess. "Yes, your highness, I am sure it was, for when I opened it, Dorothy's white kitten crept out and ran up the stairs." Hearing this, Dorothy and the wizard exchanged startled glances, for they remembered how often Eureka had longed to eat a piglet. The little girl jumped up at once. "Come, Ozma," she said anxiously. "Let us go ourselves to search for the piglet." So the two went to the dressing room of the princess and searched carefully in every corner, and among the vases and baskets and ornaments that stood about the pretty boudoir. But not a trace could be found of the tiny creature they sought. Dorothy was nearly weeping by this time, while Ozma was angry and indignant. When they returned to the others, the princess said, "There is little doubt that my pretty piglet has been eaten by that horrid kitten, and if that is true, the offender must be punished." "I don't believe Eureka would do such a dreadful thing," said Dorothy, much distressed. "Go and get my kitten, please, Jellia, and we'll hear what she has to say about it." The Green Maiden hastened away, but presently returned and said, "The kitten will not come. She threatened to scratch my eyes out if I touched her." "Where is she?" asked Dorothy. "Under the bed in your own bedroom," was the reply, so Dorothy ran to her room and found the kitten under the bed. "Come here, Eureka," she said. "I won't," answered the kitten in a surly voice. "Oh, Eureka, why are you so bad?" The kitten did not reply. "If you don't come to me right away," continued Dorothy, getting provoked. I'll take my magic belt and wish you in the country of the Gurgles." "Why do you want me?" asked Eureka, disturbed by this threat. "You must go to Princess Ozma. She wants to talk to you." "All right," returned the kitten, creeping out. "I'm not afraid of Ozma or anyone else." Dorothy carried her in her arms back to where the other sat in grief and thoughtful silence. "Tell me, Eureka," said the princess greatly, "did you eat my pretty piglet?" "I won't answer such a foolish question," asserted Eureka with a snarl. "Oh, yes, you will, dear," Dorothy declared. "The piglet is gone, and you ran out of the room when Jellia opened the door. So, if you are innocent, Eureka, you must tell the princess how you came to be in her room, and what has become of the piglet." "Who accuses me?" asked the kitten, defiantly. "No one," answered Ozma. "Your actions alone accuse you. The fact is that I left my little pet in my dressing room lying asleep on the table, and you must have stolen in without my knowing it. When next the door was open, you ran out and hid yourself, and the piglet was gone." "That's none of my business," growled the kitten. "Don't be impudent, Eureka," admonished Dorothy. "It is you who are impudent," said Eureka, "for accusing me of such a crime when you can't prove it except by guessing." Ozma was now greatly incensed by the kitten's conduct. She summoned her captain general, and when the long, lean officer appeared, she said, "Carry this cat away to prison and keep her in safe confinement until she is tried by law for the crime of murder." So the captain general took Eureka from the arms of the now weeping Dorothy, and in spite of the kitten's snarls and scratches, carried it away to prison. "What shall we do now?" asked the Scarecrow with a sigh, for such a crime had cast a gloom over all the company. "I will summon the court to meet in the throne room at 3 o'clock," replied Ozma. "I myself will be the judge, and the kitten shall have a fair trial." "What will happen if she is guilty?" asked Dorothy. "She must die," answered the princess. "9 times?" inquired the Scarecrow. "As many times as necessary," was the reply. "I will ask the Tin Woodman to defend the prisoner. Because he has such a kind heart, I am sure he will do his best to save her. And the Wogglebug shall be the public accuser, because he is so learned that no one can deceive him." "Who will be the jury?" asked the Tin Woodman. There ought to be several animals on the jury," said Ozma, "because animals understand each other better than we people understand them. So the jury shall consist of the Cowardly Lion, the Hungry Tiger, Jim the Cab Horse, the Yellow Hen, the Scarecrow, the Wizard, Tick-Tock the Machine Man, the Sawhorse, and Zeb of Hudson Ranch. That makes the 9 which the law requires, and all my people shall be admitted to hear the testimony." They now separated to prepare for the sad ceremony, for whenever an appeal is made to law, sorrow is almost certain to follow, even in the fairyland like Oz. But it must be stated that the people of the land were generally so well behaved that there was not a single lawyer amongst them, and it had been years since any ruler had sat in judgment upon an offender of the law, the crime of murder being the most dreadful crime of all. Tremendous excitement prevailed in the Emerald City when the news of Eureka's arrest and trial had become known. The Wizard, when he returned to his own room, was exceedingly thoughtful. He had no doubt Eureka had eaten his piglet, but he realized that the kitten cannot be depended upon at all times to act properly, since its nature is to destroy small animals and even birds for food, and the tame cat that we keep in our houses today is descendant from the wild cat of the jungle, a very ferocious creature indeed. The Wizard knew that if Dorothy's pet was found guilty and condemned to death, the little girl would be made very unhappy. So, although he grieved over the piglet's sad fate as much as any of them, he resolved to save Eureka's life. Sending for the Tin Woodman, the Wizard took him to a corner and whispered, "My friend, it is your duty to defend the white kitten and try to save her. But I fear you will fail because Eureka has long wished to eat a piglet. To my certain knowledge, and my opinion is that she has been unable to resist the temptation. Yet her disgrace and death would not bring back the piglet, but only serve to make Dorothy unhappy. So I intend to prove the kitten's innocence by a trick." He drew from his inside pocket one of the 8 tiny piglets that were remaining and continued, "This creature you must hide in some safe place, and if the jury decides that Eureka is guilty, you may then produce this piglet and claim it is the one that was lost. All the piglets are exactly alike, so no one can dispute your words. This deception will save Eureka's life, and then we may all be happy again." "I do not like to deceive my friends," replied the Tin Woodman. "Still, my kind heart urges me to save Eureka's life, and I can usually trust my heart to do the right thing, so I will do as you say, friend wizard." After some thought, he placed the little pig inside his funnel-shaped hat, and then put the hat back on his head and went back to his room to think over his speech to the jury. And no worries at all. I appreciate that, Ancient Mew. And I'm glad that I can bring that to you guys and give you that voice and share it with y'all. People walk so loudly by my door. Thump, thump. All right, last 2 chapters. Let's rock them out. Chapter 19, the wizard performs another trick. At 3 o'clock, the throne room was crowded with citizens, men, women, and children being eager to witness the great trial. Princess Ozma, dressed in her most splendid robes of state, sat in the magnificent emerald throne, with her jeweled scepter in one hand and her sparkled coronet upon her fair brow. Beyond her throne stood 28 officers of her royal army and many officials of the royal household. At her right sat the queerly assorted jury, animals, animated dummies, and people, all gravely prepared to listen to what was said. The kitten had been placed in a large cage just before the throne, where she sat upon her haunches and gazed through the bars at the crowd around her with seeming unconcern. And now, at a signal from Ozma, the Wogglebug arose and addressed the jury. His tone was pompous, and he strutted up and down in an absurd attempt to appear dignified. "Your Royal Highness and fellow citizens," he began, "the small cat you see, a prisoner before you, is accused of the crime of first murdering and then eating our esteemed ruler's fat piglet, or else first eating and then murdering it. In either case, the grave crime has been committed, which deserves a grave punishment." "Do you mean my kitten must be put in a grave?" asked Dorothy. "Don't interrupt, little girl," said the Wogglebug. "When I get my thoughts arranged in good order, I do not like to have anything upset them or throw them into confusion." "If your thoughts were any good, they wouldn't become confused," remarked the Scarecrow earnestly. "My thoughts are always, 'Is this a trial of thoughts or of kittens?'" demanded the Wogglebug. "It is a trial of one kitten," replied the Scarecrow, "but your manner is a trial of all." "Let the public accuser continue," called Ozma from her throne, "and I pray you do not interrupt him." "The criminal who now sits before the court licking her paws," resumed the Wogglebug, "has long desired to unlawfully eat a fat piglet, which was no bigger than a mouse, and finally she made a wicked plan to satisfy her depraved appetite for pork. I can see her in my mind's eye." "What's that?" asked Scarecrow. "I say I can see her in my mind's eye." "The mind has no eye," declared the Scarecrow. "It's blind." "Your Highness," cried the Wogglebug, appealing to Ozma, "have I a mind's eye or haven't I?" "If you have, it is invisible," said the princess. "Very true," returned the Wogglebug, bowing. "I say I see the criminal in my mind's eye, creeping stealthily into the room of our Ozma and secretly secreting herself when no one was looking until the princess had gone away and the door was closed. Then the murderer was alone with her helpless victim, the fat piglet, and I can see her pounce upon the innocent creature and eat it up." "Are you still seeing with your mind's eye?" inquired the Scarecrow. "Of course, how else could I see it? And we know this thing is true, because since the time of that interview, there was no piglets to be found anywhere." "I suppose if the cat had been gone instead of the piglet, your mind's eye would see the piglet is eating the cat," suggested the Scarecrow. "Very likely," acknowledged the Wogglebug. "And now, fellow citizens and creatures of the jury, I assert that so awful a crime deserves death, and in the case of the ferocious animal before you, who is now washing her face, the death penalty should be inflicted 9 times. There was a great applause when the speaker sat down. Then the princess spoke in a stern voice. "Prisoner, what have you to say for yourself? Are you guilty or not guilty?" Why, that's for you to find out, replied Eureka. If you can prove I'm guilty, I'll be willing to die 9 times, but a mind's eye is no proof, because the Wogglebug has no mind to see it with. Never mind, dear, said Dorothy. Then the Tin Woodman arose and said, Respected jury and dearly beloved Ozma, I pray you do not judge this feline prisoner unfeelingly. I do not think the innocent kitten can be guilty, and surely it is unkind to accuse a luncheon of being a murder. Eureka is a sweet pet of a lovely girl whom we all admire, and gentleness and innocence are her chief virtues. Look at the kitten's intelligent eyes. Here Eureka closed her eyes sleepily, gazing at her smiling countenance. Here Eureka snarled and showed her teeth. Mark the tender pose of her soft, padded little hands. Here Eureka bared her sharp claws and scratched at the bars of the cage. Would such a gentle animal be guilty of eating a fellow creature? No, 1,000 times no. Oh, cut it short, said Eureka. You've talked long enough. I'm trying to defend you, remonstrated the Tin Woodman. Then say something sensible, retorted the kitten. Tell them I would be foolish for me to eat the piglet, because I had sense enough to know it would raise a row if I did. But don't try to make out I'm too innocent to eat a fat piglet. If I could do it and not be found out, I imagine it would taste mighty good. Perhaps it would to those who eat, remarked the Tin Woodman. I myself, not being built to eat, have no personal experience in such matters. But I remember that our great poet once said, To eat is sweet when hunger's seat demands a treat of savory meat. Take this into consideration, friends of the jury, and you will readily decide that the kitten is wrongfully accused and should be set at liberty. When the Tin Woodman sat down, no one applauded him, for his arguments had not been very convincing, and few believed that he had proved Eureka's innocence. As for the jury, the members whispered to each other for a few moments, and then they appointed the Hungry Tiger as their spokesman. The huge beast slowly rose and said, Kittens have no consciousness, and so they eat whatever pleases them. The jury believes the white kitten known as Eureka is guilty of having eaten the piglet owned by Princess Ozma, and recommends that she be put to death in punishment of this crime. The judgment of the judgment of the jury was received with great applause, although Dorothy was sobbing miserably at the fate of her pet. The princess was just about to order Eureka's head chopped off with the Tin Woodman's axe when that brilliant personage once more arose and addressed her. Your Highness, he said, see how easy it is for a jury to be mistaken? The kitten could not have eaten your piglet, for here it is. He took off his funnel hat. From beneath it produced a tiny white piglet, which he held aloft, that all might see it clearly. Ozma was delighted and exclaimed eagerly, Give me my pet, Nick Chopper. And all the people cheered and clapped their hands, rejoiced that the prisoner had escaped death and been proved to be innocent. As the princess held the white piglet in her arms and stroked its soft hair, she said, Let Eureka out of the cage, for she is no longer a prisoner, but our good friend. Where did you find my missing pet, Nick Chopper? In a room of the palace, he answered. Justice, remarked the Scarecrow with a sigh, is a dangerous thing to meddle with. If you hadn't happened to find that piglet, Eureka would surely have been executed. But justice prevailed at the least, said Ozma. For here is my pet, and Eureka once more is free. I refuse to be free, cried the kitten in a sharp voice, unless the wizard can do his trick with 8 piglets. If he can produce but 7, then this is not the piglet that was lost, but another one. Hush, Eureka, warned the wizard. Don't be foolish, advised the Tin Woodman, or you may be sorry for it. The piglet that belonged to the princess wore an emerald collar, said Eureka, loudly enough for all to hear. So it did, exclaimed Ozma. This cannot be the one the wizard gave me. Of course not. He had 9 of them altogether, declared Eureka, and I must say that it was very stingy of him not to let me eat just a few. But now that this foolish trial is ended, I will tell you what really became of your pet piglet. At this, everyone in the throne room suddenly became quiet, and the kitten continued in a calm, mocking tone of voice. I will confess that I intended to eat the little piglet for my breakfast. So I crept into the room where it was kept while the princess was dressing and hid myself under the chair. When Ozma went away, she closed the door and left her pet on the table. At once I jumped up and told the piglet not to make a fuss, for he would be inside me in half a second. But no one can teach one of these creatures to be reasonable. Instead of keeping still, so I could eat him comfortably, he trembled so with fear that he fell off the table into a big vase that was standing on the floor. The vase had a very small neck and spread out at the top like a bowl. At first, the piglet stuck in the neck of the vase, and I thought I should set him free after all. But he wriggled himself through and fell down into the deep bottom part, and I suppose he's there yet. All were astonished at this confession, and Ozma at once sent an officer to her room to fetch the vase. When he returned, the princess looked down the narrow neck of the big ornament and discovered her lost piglet, just as Eureka had said she would. There was no way to get the creature out without breaking the vase, so the Tin Woodman smashed it with his axe and set the little prisoner free. Then the crowd cheered lustily, and Dorothy hugged the kitten in her arms and told her how delighted she was to know that she was innocent. "But why didn't you tell us at first?" she asked. "It would have spoiled the fun," replied the kitten, yawning. Ozma gave the wizard back the piglet he had so kindly allowed Nick Chopper to substitute for the lost one, and then she carried her own into the apartments of the palace where she lived. And now, the trial being over, the good citizens of Emerald City scattered to their homes, well content with the day's amusement. Quick and speedy trial. And can we just say, it's so like a cat to know what happened and still allow themselves to be tried for it. Just because they were bored. That just sounds so much like a cat. All right, last chapter, chapter 20. Zeb returns to the ranch. So we still going home. Eureka was much surprised to find herself in disgrace, but she was, in spite of the fact that she had not eaten the piglet, for the folks of Oz knew the kitten had tried to commit the crime, and that only an accident had prevented her from doing so. Therefore, even the hungry tiger preferred not to associate with her. Eureka was forbidden to wander around the palace and was made to stay in confinement in Dorothy's room. So she began to beg her mistress to send her some other place where she could enjoy herself better. Dorothy was herself anxious to get home, so she promised Eureka they would not stay in the land of Oz much longer. The next evening, after the trial, the little girl begged Ozma to allow her to look at the enchanted picture, but the princess readily consented. She took the child to her room and said, "Make your wish, dear, and the picture will show you the scene you desire to behold." When Dorothy found, with the aid of the enchanted picture, that Uncle Henry had returned to the farm in Kansas, and she also saw that both he and Aunt Em were dressed in mourning because they thought their little niece had been killed by the earthquake. "Really," said the girl anxiously, "I must get back as soon as possible to my own folks." Zeb also wanted to see his home, and although he did not find anyone mourning for him, the sight of Hugson's ranch and the picture made him long to get back there. "This is a fine country, and I like all the people that live in it," he told Dorothy. "But the fact is, Jim and I don't seem to fit into fairyland, and the old horse has been begging me to go home again ever since we lost the race. So, if you can find a way to fix it, we'll be much obliged to you." "Ozma can do it easily," replied Dorothy. "Tomorrow morning, I'll go to Kansas, and you'll go to California." That last evening was so delightful that the boy will never forget it as long as he lives. They were all together, except Eureka, in the pretty rooms of the princess, and the wizard did some new tricks, and the scarecrow told stories, and the Tin Woodman sang a love song in a sonorous metallic voice, and everybody laughed and had a good time. Then Dorothy wound up TikTok, and he danced a jig to amuse the company, after which the Yellow Hen related some of her adventures with the Gnome King in the land of Ev. The princess served delicious refreshments to those who were in the habit of eating, and when Dorothy's bedtime arrived, the company separated after exchanging many friendly sentiments. Next morning, they all assembled for the final parting, and many of the officials and courtiers came to look upon the impressive ceremonies. Dorothy held Eureka in her arms and bade her friends a fond goodbye. "You must come again sometime," said the little wizard, and she promised she would if she found it possible to do so. "But Uncle Henry and Aunt Em need me to help them," she added, "so I can't ever be very long away from the farm in Kansas." Ozma wore the magic belt, and when she kissed Dorothy farewell and made her wish, the little girl and her kitten disappeared in a twinkling. "Where is she?" asked Zeb, rather bewildered by the suddenness of it. "Greeting her uncle and aunt in Kansas by this time," returned Ozma with a smile. Then Zeb brought out Jim, all harnessed to the buggy, and took his seat. "I'm much obliged for all your kindness," said the boy, "and very grateful to you for saving my life and sending me home again after all the good times I've had. I think this is the loveliest country in the world, but not being fairies, Jim and I feel we ought to be where we belong. And that's at the ranch. Goodbye, everyone." He gave a start and rubbed his eyes. Jim was trotting along the well-known road, shaking his ears and whisking his tail with a contented motion. Just ahead of them were the gates of Hugson's ranch, and Uncle Hugson now came out and stood with uplifted arms and wide-open mouth, staring in amazement. "Goodness gracious, it's Zeb! And Jim, too!" he exclaimed. "Where in the world have you been, my lad?" "Why, in the world, Uncle?" answered Zeb with a laugh. "In the world, get it? In the world, Uncle." And that's the end. That's the end of the Wizard, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I appreciate you guys sticking it out to the end. I truly do. And I know we just made it to that 3-hour mark, so we went about an hour longer than we normally do. But I think it was a good call so that we can just start the next book fresh. There's 24. Yeah, there's 24 chapters in the next book, so I figured we could do 8, 16, 24, 8 chapter reads 3 times. We could do that. Hey, Finn. Yep. Finn. Thank you, Kay. Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me on that. Next Monday, we will be right back here for episode 16 and our 5th book, I believe, of the Oz series. This one's called The Road to Oz. Of course, he has extra large titles. This is called The Road to Oz, in which is related how Dorothy Gale of Kansas, the Shaggy Man, Button Bright, and Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, met on an enchanted road and followed it all the way to the marvelous land of Oz. By Frank L. Baum. Drink some honey ginger tea. Ooh, that does sound good. I appreciate that, Adam Jones. And as is tradition, I will read the To My Readers section of the next book, just because we go through the inspiration and we can jump right into it next week. But to my readers, he says, "Well, my dears, here's what you have asked for, another Oz book about Dorothy's strange adventures. Toto is in this story because you wanted him to be there, and many other characters which you will recognize are in the story too. Indeed, the wishes of my little correspondents have been considered as carefully as possible, and if the story is not exactly as you would have written it yourselves, you must remember that a story has to be a story before it can be written down, and the writer cannot change it much without spoiling it. In the preface to Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, I said I would like to write some stories that were not Oz stories, because I thought I had written about Oz long enough. But since that volume was published, I have been fairly deluged with letters from children imploring me to write more about Dorothy and more about Oz. And since I write only to please the children, I shall try to respect your wishes. There are some new characters in this book that ought to win your love. I'm very fond of the Shaggy Man myself, and I think you'll like him too. As for the Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, the stupid little Button Bright, they seem to have brought new element of fun to these Oz stories, and I'm glad I discovered them. Yet I am anxious to have you write and tell me how you like them. Since this book was written, I have received some very remarkable news from the land of Oz, which has greatly astonished me. I believe it will astonish you too, my dears, when you hear it. But it is such a long and exciting story that it must be saved for another book. And perhaps that book will be the last of the story that will ever be told about the Land of Oz. So he's going into this thinking this is going to be the last book that he's ever going to write about Oz. Excellent. Well, super appreciate everybody being here. I'm not sure who else is live right now. What's up, CBC? I hope you're doing well. Let's take a peek and see who's on right now. Stafford spoke at Dagger. Let's see. I'm curious. Oh, red or blue is on. I haven't rated red or blue in a while. And we did raid Stafford last night. Well, I will let you all decide because I know that it's always a vibe. So, yeah, have a great one, Halion. I appreciate you. So I'm caught between red or blue or Stafford. So I will say that Stafford right now is playing a video game. It's a very cool video game. Doing a playthrough of Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. And red and blue is just doing his normal rip and shit stream. Yes, in fact, you enlightened me to that, Rafa. Rob got the link for you there. Excellent. Well, we can go. Yeah, go ahead and drop Rob's link. We'll go over to Rob, and he's kind of a nice, chill guy. I always like to support, and he likes to support us too. In fact, if I can remember correctly, he helped us achieve many milestones with bringing his people on over. And though there's only 8 of us here, we can still make that little impact. Go over and PokeGhost read raid. I probably won't be hanging out over there too long. I'm gonna get some dinner, take the dog down and all that, but super appreciate you guys being here. And remember to always go out and get everything that you set out to get, but it takes $0 to be a good person. So always remember to do it through. Peace, love, and Pokemon. And thank you all for believing in ghosts. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.